Are your eyes under your heels? Or is that head of yours just there to complete the set? Colonel Vance shouted in the back courtyard behind the mess hall. He stood rigid with anger, one hand pointed straight at Maya Williams' face. "Sir," Maya said calmly, "I'm looking for Administrative Office 3. Administrative Office 3 is right behind you." Colonel Richard Vance jabbed a finger toward the row of old red brick buildings behind her. "You walked past it twice. Or wherever you came from. Do people need someone to hold their hand and point out every door?" A few soldiers lowered their faces toward their breakfast trays. "I arrived on base this morning, sir," Maya replied. "I'll remember the route." "Remember?" Vance stepped closer, his polished shoes stopping just inches from hers. "This is not a place for slow learners. This base does not operate on feelings. It does not operate on speeches about equal opportunity. And it sure as hell does not operate to make people feel welcome just because someone decided the place needed a better picture for the brochure." Maya looked directly at him. "I'm here to carry out my assigned duty. Your duty is to follow orders." Vance tilted his head, lowering his voice just enough to make it more personal while still allowing every person nearby to hear. "And your first lesson is not to stand in the middle of a walkway like the entire base is supposed to move around you." "I understand, sir," Maya said. Vance's eyes moved over her with open irritation. "Eyesore," he muttered, not quietly enough to be accidental. At that exact moment, a metal tray crashed to the floor near the kitchen entrance. Coffee splashed across the tile in a dark brown streak. Vance turned so sharply it looked. "You again?" Clara froze. "Colonel, sir, I'm sorry. My hand slipped. I'll clean it right up." "Sorry?" Vance gave a cold laugh. "I hear that word from you so often it's starting to sound like a medical condition." Maya said nothing, but her eyes settled on Clara's shoulders. Then Maya looked back at Vance. He noticed. The simple act of being observed seemed to offend him. His face hardened as he turned back toward her. "First day on this base and you're already showing that lazy, undisciplined attitude. I've seen your kind before in this part of the South. You think a little special treatment gives you the right to stir up trouble?" "I meant no disrespect, sir," Maya said. Vance cut her off. "Miss William, do you want to learn how this base maintains discipline?" "I'm willing to learn the procedure, sir." "Procedure?" His mouth curled. "Good. First procedure. New people learn their place." He pointed down at the spilled coffee. "You clean it." Clara immediately stepped forward. "Colonel." "Sir, that was my fault." Did I ask you?" Vance barked. Clara fell silent. Maya looked at the coffee spreading across the pale tile. She understood. At once. This was not about a spill. This was a demonstration. Maya slowly placed the folder she was carrying on a nearby table, then took the rag from Clara's hand. "Yes, sir." Vance folded his arms across his chest. "Good. At least you know how to listen." He seemed pleased with himself, as if he had found a fresh object to press beneath his boot. "So, what did you say your name was?" "Maya William," she said. "No rank?" Maya lifted her eyes to him. "Would that make a difference, sir?" The reply was gentle, almost too soft to be called defiance, but it struck the center of his arrogance all the same. Vance stepped nearer. "Careful with that mouth, William. Plenty of people come onto this base thinking they're special. They learn. Some slowly, some painfully. Up close, Maya could smell burnt coffee, floor cleaner, bacon grease, and fear. She knelt and began wiping the coffee from the tile. The rag was thin and already damp. The stain spread before it faded. Clara stood beside her, ashamed, whispering, "Baby, you don't have to do that." Maya did not look up. "It's all right, Mrs. Johnson." Clara's breath caught softly. Maya had used her name, not kitchen staff, not the cook, not you people. Her name. Vance watched, satisfied. "Look closely," he said loudly, making sure every soldier around the mess hall could hear. "This is how this base operates. Not with soft lectures about fairness. Not with attitudes from people who think they're smarter than the officers above them. It operates through discipline." Maya remained on one knee against the tile, the rag in her hand slowly moving over the coffee stain. Vance lowered his voice. but the contempt stayed sharp in every word. Do you see yourself now, William? A newcomer who doesn't know the roads, doesn't know the rules, but already seems very interested in watching other people. He glanced toward the silent soldiers. All of you should remember this image too. On this base, anyone who forgets their place will be reminded. Clara stood near the kitchen door, her face pale. Colonel, sir. She doesn't need to. Shut your mouth, Clara. Vance cut her off without even turning to look at her. I don't need a kitchen employee teaching me how to handle new people. He stared down at Maya. You've only just started learning. Then he stepped back, his voice growing colder. I want you to remember this feeling, William. The feeling of kneeling in front of the whole base. The feeling of everyone seeing who gives the orders and who follows them. Maya stood, then folded the rag neatly in her hands. I'll remember, sir. Captain Daniel Mercer stood under the shade near the side entrance. He was one of the few people on Fort Redstone who knew who Maya really was. She had come to see what happened when no one important appeared to be watching. Now she had seen it. Vance leaned down slightly, his voice turning almost conversational. Welcome to my kingdom, girl. Let's see how long that spine of yours stays straight under my boot. Then he turned and walked away with a careless confidence. A few soldiers stepped aside, though he was no longer in their path. Maya kept wiping until the coffee was gone. Only then did she rise. Clara reached for the rag with trembling fingers. You should have let me do it. Maya handed it back gently. He wanted an audience. Mrs. Johnson. I needed to know how many people had learned to stay quiet. Clara stared at her for a long moment, and something like recognition passed through her tired eyes. Mrs. Clara Mae Johnson took the tray from Maya with careful hands. You need to get yourself out of here, before he decides to make you his morning hobby. Maya looked toward the doorway where Vance had vanished. Does he do that often? Clara gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. Baby, around here Colonel Vance doesn't need a reason. He just needs a room. That sentence stayed with Maya. Maya turned back to Clara. How long have you worked here, Mrs. Johnson? 23 years this coming November, Clara said. Long enough to remember when this place had different problems, and long enough to know when the same problems put on new uniforms. Before she could ask another question, Captain Daniel Mercer stepped into the courtyard. He waited until 2 soldiers passed out of earshot, then approached her. Miss William, he said carefully. Maya noticed the deliberate choice. Not Major. Not here. Not yet. Captain Mercer, she replied. His eyes moved to Clara, then back to Maya. Administrative Office 3 is this way. I can walk you over. You're calmer than I expected, Mercer said quietly. Maya did not turn her head right away. She used a paper towel to wipe the faint coffee stain still clinging to the cuff of her sleeve, then folded the towel neatly before dropping it into the trash can. He wanted me to lose my temper, she replied. He wanted more than that. Mercer looked back toward the mess hall. He wanted everyone to see you broken on your first day. Maya turned to him. And what did everyone see? Mercer was silent for a few seconds. They saw you didn't break, he said. Then today wasn't wasted. If Maya's quiet strength made you feel something, please take a moment to like this video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Your city, your state, or your country. Because who knows? There may be someone near you watching this story right along with you. Mercer lowered his voice further. Major William, I need to be direct. You should send a report now. What just happened is enough to open an official record. Maya looked at him. Here, I'm William from administration. No one from administration looks at a man like Vance the way you just looked at him. Then I need to learn how to look less observant. Mercer did not smile. I'm serious. Vance has eyes and ears everywhere. If he suspects you're not an ordinary new arrival, he'll clean up everything before you touch a file. That is exactly why I can't report yet. He humiliated you in front of half the base. Captain, Maya said, keeping her voice even. If I send a report today, he gets warned. Maybe there's a preliminary inquiry. Maybe he loses access to a few files for a day or two, but he will know he is being watched. And if you wait, he'll continue being himself. Mercer frowned. You're making yourself bait. I'm letting him speak with his own mouth. And if he does more than speak, Maya stopped beside a narrow window overlooking the training yard. A line of soldiers jogged past in formation, their boots striking the pavement in steady rhythm. I grew up in a neighborhood where people learned early that not everyone in uniform protects justice, Maya said. I know how to stand still when someone wants me afraid. Mercer exhaled softly. The first meeting starts at 9. Vance will be there. Good. It's not good. He hates outsiders reviewing his system. Then we'll see how much he hates it. The next morning, in conference room 2, 6 people were already seated when Maya walked in. Vance looked up when he saw Maya. Well, Miss William, he said, stretching her name with open mockery. You found this room without anyone holding your hand. Progress. A few people looked down at the papers in front of them. No one spoke. Maya pulled out a chair and sat. Thank you for your concern, sir. Vance raised an eyebrow. I'm not concerned, I observe. Then we have that in common. The air in the room tightened. Sergeant Major Thomas Avery, a gray-haired enlisted leader with tired eyes and a careful mouth, cleared his throat. Can we begin? Vance leaned back in his chair. Of course. We have a new administrative support person here to review a few paperwork procedures, mostly so higher command can feel we're cooperating. Maya opened the thin folder in front of her. I was asked to review the intake and handling process for internal complaints filed within the last 6 months. Vance chuckled. That sounds important. I'm simply repeating the scope of the work. The scope of your work is to read what you're given. Don't turn it into a witch hunt. I haven't used that term, sir. No, he said. But people like you usually carry it in their pocket. A young female lieutenant at the far end of the table lifted her head slightly, then immediately looked down again. Maya turned the first page. I'd like to begin with the disciplinary file involving Sergeant Layla Brooks. The room went silent. Vance no longer smiled. That matter is closed. That is why I'd like to understand how the base reached its conclusion. You do not have the authority to reopen a processed file. Sergeant Major Avery spoke carefully. Sir, according to the regional command notice, the review team may examine records connected to complaints and disciplinary actions arising from complaints. Vance turned his head slowly toward him. I know what the notice says, Avery. Maya kept her eyes on Vance. Sergeant Brooks was demoted 2 weeks after filing a harassment complaint against a senior NCO. I'd like to see the interview records, the initial investigative report, and the stated basis for the disciplinary action. Vance placed one hand flat on the table. You don't understand. Command culture here. Maya's voice remained soft. What command culture allows someone to be demoted after reporting harassment? A faint inhale came from the end of the table. Vance leaned forward. Careful, William. I'm asking about procedure, sir. No. You're bringing politics into the Army. Harassment and retaliation against a complainant are not politics. That's what outsiders call things they don't understand. Vance pointed at the folder in front of Maya. Here, we maintain order. Sometimes a soldier can't handle pressure, makes mistakes, and then tries to turn herself into a victim. Vance looked around the table as if reminding every person there that he still controlled the room's breathing. This is the problem with bringing people who don't understand the military into an old installation. They read a few complaint lines, hear a few emotional stories, and suddenly think they can teach us how to command. The meeting room grew suffocating. The old air conditioner rattled overhead. In the hallway outside, footsteps passed, then faded away, but no one inside moved. Maya looked down at Sergeant Brooks's name on the page. The file was closed, but the truth inside it had just begun to breathe. Maya did not answer Colonel Vance immediately. She let his words sit in the stale air of conference room 2, where every person at the table seemed to understand the danger of replying too quickly. The old air conditioner rattled above them, pushing out air that smelled faintly of dust and burned wiring. Somewhere beyond the closed door, Fort Redstone continued its morning routine, but inside the room, time had narrowed to the thin file beneath Maya's hand. Sergeant Layla Brooks, demoted 2 weeks after filing a harassment complaint, closed without proper explanation. Maya turned one page slowly. I'm not here to teach anyone how to command, sir. I'm here to understand how this office documents command decisions. Vance smiled as if she had amused him. That sounds like something they taught you in a seminar. No, Maya said. That sounds like something that keeps a base from being sued. Sergeant Major Avery lowered his eyes, but not before Maya saw the corner of his mouth move. The young female lieutenant at the end of the table stayed perfectly still, though her fingers tightened around her pen. Vance's smile disappeared. "Miss William," he said, "you are here in an administrative support capacity. Do not confuse paperwork with authority." Maya looked at the blank signature line in the file. Authority usually leaves a signature. The silence that followed was different from the silence in the courtyard. That had been fear. This was recognition. Even the people pretending not to listen had heard the sentence land. Vance leaned back in his chair. The Brooks matter involved conduct issues unrelated to her complaint. Then there should be documentation separating the two. There is. I don't see it in this packet. Then perhaps you weren't given the full packet. That's why I'm asking for it. He stared at her. Request denied. Maya closed the folder gently. On what basis? On the basis that I command this installation. That is not a records retention category, sir. Avery cleared his throat again, more softly this time. Colonel, if the regional review notice applies, withholding related records may create more questions than providing them. Sighed. Avery cleared his throat. Vance turned on him so fast the older man stopped speaking. Sergeant Major, I do not recall asking you to interpret legal procedure. No, sir, Avery said, his voice flattening into obedience. Maya noted that too. Vance did not merely silence the weak. He silenced the experienced. That was more dangerous. The meeting dragged on for another 20 minutes, but nothing useful was volunteered. Every answer came polished, trimmed, and wrapped in command language. Complaints became morale, misunderstandings. Retaliation became performance correction. Harassment became personality conflict. Missing documents became administrative delay. By the time Vance ended the meeting, he looked pleased again. Miss William, you'll receive the documents my office determines are relevant. Until then, stay in your lane. Maya gathered her folder. I intend to. His eyes narrowed. He could not decide whether she had obeyed him or insulted him, and that uncertainty irritated him more than either one would have. The others filed out quickly. The young female lieutenant passed Maya without speaking, but as she did, a folded yellow sticky note slipped from her legal pad and landed beside Maya's chair. Maya did not reach for it immediately. She waited until the room was nearly empty, then picked it up with the same calm motion she used to straighten her papers. 2 words had been written in small, careful handwriting. Ask Clara. Maya folded the note into her palm. Outside conference room 2. Mercer caught up with her near the drinking fountain. That went worse than I hoped. It went better than he realizes. Mercer looked exhausted already. You antagonized him. I asked for a missing file. With Vance, that's the same thing. Maya slipped the sticky note into her folder without showing it. I need time in the mess hall. He assigned you to supply inventory after lunch. Then I have until lunch. Mercer glanced toward the hallway, camera mounted in the corner. Be careful. If someone passed you that note, Vance has people scared enough to deny it. I don't need them brave yet, Maya said. I just need them accurate. She found Clara Mae Johnson in the back storage room of the mess hall, counting boxes of oatmeal packets and plastic-wrapped utensils. The lunch rush had not started, but the kitchen was already alive with heat. Pots clanged. A dishwasher roared. Someone seasoned a tray of chicken with black pepper and paprika. The smell of cornbread drifted from one oven, warm and familiar enough to make the room feel almost like a church basement before Sunday supper. Clara looked up when Maya entered. You lost again? Not this time. That's good. Colonel might charge you rent for walking in circles. Maya smiled faintly. Mrs. Johnson, do you know Sergeant Layla Brooks? The humor left Clara's face. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she put down the box cutter in her hand and looked toward the open doorway. Who told you to ask me that? Someone who was afraid to say more. Clara wiped both hands on her apron. People are afraid for a reason. I know. No, baby. You saw a reason this morning. That ain't the same as knowing it. Maya accepted the correction. Then, Help me know it. Clara studied her. Kitchen noise filled the space between them. Somewhere in the front, a young soldier laughed too loudly at something, the kind of laugh people used when they wanted to feel normal. Finally, Clara walked to an old metal cabinet beside the dry storage shelves. She pulled a ring of keys from her apron pocket and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside were recipe binders, handwritten meal plans, old staff schedules, and a faded church fan from a Baptist revival. From beneath a binder labeled Thanksgiving Rotation, Clara removed a worn black notebook held together with a rubber band. "My granddaughter keeps telling me to put things in a computer," Clara said. "But paper doesn't forget because somebody changed a password." She handed the notebook to Maya. Maya did not open it right away. "What is this?" "Dates, names, missing supplies, changed shifts, folks who complained and then got punished for it. Nothing fancy, just what I saw." "Why keep it?" Clara looked toward the kitchen door, where sunlight from the courtyard cut a bright shape across the floor. "Because when you get to be my age, child, you learn there are two kinds of history. The one they frame on a wall, and the one somebody has to hide in a drawer." Maya opened the notebook. The first pages were neat, written in blue ink. Food counts, shift schedules, names. Then the entries changed. A cook named Denise had her hours cut after reporting missing inventory. A janitor named Mr. Wilkes was reassigned after objecting to racial slurs from a supply sergeant. Night meals for motor pool soldiers were repeatedly reduced, though the paperwork showed full distribution. Besides several dates, Clara had written the same initials, R. V. Richard Vance. Maya turned another page and found Sergeant Brooks's name. Brooks asked about missing witness statement. Next week, placed on extra duty, Brooks filed harassment complaint. 2 weeks later, demoted. Brooks told to stop, making command look bad. Maya felt the story inside the official file beginning to crack open. Clara watched her read. Layla came in here after they took her stripes. Didn't cry. That girl stood right over there by the coffee machine, straight as a fence post. But her hands were shaking so bad she couldn't get the lid on her cup. "Did she tell you what happened?" "She said the truth had become government property, and somehow she wasn't cleared to touch it anymore." Maya closed the notebook carefully. "May I copy this?" Clara's face tightened with fear. "I won't take it from you," Maya said. "And I won't use your name unless you choose to give it." Clara looked down at the notebook, then at the kitchen beyond them. "Colonel Vance thinks people like me don't keep records. He thinks we just mop, cook, say yes sir, and go home tired." Maya's voice softened. That was his mistake. Clara held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Maya photographed the pages quickly with a secure device Mercer had provided, careful to capture dates, names, and handwriting. When she finished, Clara wrapped the rubber band around the notebook again and slid it back beneath the Thanksgiving binder. Before Maya left, Clara touched her arm. "You be careful with that man," she said. "He don't just punish folks. He makes examples." Maya thought of the coffee on the tile, Vance's voice ringing across the courtyard, the soldiers forced to watch. "He already tried," she said. Clara shook her head. "No, baby. That was him saying hello." Maya stepped out of the storage room just as the first lunch trays began sliding across the serving line. Soldiers moved in with practiced hunger, joking softly, pretending the base was ordinary. But in Maya's folder, hidden beneath clean administrative forms, Clara's handwritten history now had a second life. And somewhere inside Fort Redstone, a closed file had begun to open. By early afternoon, the heat inside the supply office had become almost personal. It pressed against the walls, collected beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights, and turned every stack of cardboard boxes into another reminder that Colonel Vance knew how to disguise punishment as procedure. Maya Williams stood between two metal shelving units, with a clipboard in one hand, and Clara Mae Johnson's hidden notebook still fresh in her mind. Around her were paper towels, canned vegetables, disposable gloves, cleaning fluid, coffee filters, and enough inventory sheets to bury a careless person in boredom. But Maya was not careless, and boredom had never frightened her. Boring places were where frightened men hid useful things. A civilian supply clerk named Mr. Earl Patterson sat at a small desk near the back, sorting requisition forms with the slow patience of a man who had learned not to hurry in a building where every mistake could be used against him. He was white-haired, narrow-shouldered, and wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck. Every few minutes, he glanced at Maya as though deciding whether she was a problem or a possible answer to one. "You're the one Colonel had cleaning coffee this morning," he finally said. Maya checked a line of numbers against a box label. "That seems to be my official introduction." Earl gave a dry grunt. "Around here, that's practically a welcome ceremony." She looked up. "Does everyone talk about him like that? Only when he's not in the room?" "Most folks with a mortgage do." That was the kind of sentence Maya had heard all her life, from working people. Not dramatic, not brave in the way movies liked bravery, just honest enough to carry the weight of survival. She marked the inventory sheet and moved to the next shelf. "I was told to count supply stock," she said. "Is there anything in here that tends to disappear?" Earl stopped sorting. The room seemed to shrink. "Depends who's asking," he said. "William, from administration. That's what your badge says." "And what do you say?" Earl studied her longer this time. Outside the open door, 2 soldiers passed by laughing about weekend barbecue plans, their voices fading down the hall. Earl waited until they were gone. "I say, a woman who kneels without bowing is either trouble or law," he said. Maya did not smile, but something in her eyes changed. Sometimes those looked the same from a distance. Earl reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded copy of a requisition form. He did not hand it to her right away. "You didn't get this from me." "I didn't get what?" He nodded once, satisfied, then slid it across the desk. The form listed food supplies transferred from mess hall storage to a command hospitality function 3 nights earlier. Maya recognized several item numbers from Clara's notebook. The same missing portions meant for night shift motor pool soldiers had been redirected to a private dinner in the officer's annex. "Who approved the transfer?" Maya asked. Earl tapped the bottom corner of the page. There it was. R. Vance. "It happens often?" she asked. "Often enough that Mrs. Johnson started counting." Maya folded the copy and tucked it inside her clipboard. "Why keep this?" Earl leaned back in his chair. "My son did 2 tours overseas. Came home with 1 good knee and a head full of storms. I don't like seeing young soldiers come off 12-hour shifts and get told there's not enough food because some colonel wants pork loin and peach cobbler for his friends." The simple anger in his voice was steady, old, and deeply American. It was the anger of a man who had paid taxes, saluted flags, buried friends, and still believed service meant something more than privilege at the top. Before Maya could answer, sharp footsteps entered the hallway. Earl's face closed like a book. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Strickland appeared in the doorway. He was trim, pale, and polished in a way that felt less like discipline than performance. Maya recognized him from the morning meeting, Vance's quiet right hand. "Miss William," Strickland said. "Still counting paper cups?" "Yes, sir. Don't strain yourself. We wouldn't want administration claiming the supply closet was too demanding." Earl looked down at his forms. Strickland stepped into the room, his eyes moving from Maya's clipboard to Earl's desk. "Colonel Vance asked me to check your progress." "That's considerate of him. He's a considerate commander when people understand boundaries." Maya held his gaze. "I'm learning a lot about boundaries today." Something cold moved behind Strickland's expression. He was not as loud as Vance, but Maya sensed he might be more careful. Loud men left dents. Careful men erased fingerprints. Strickland walked to the shelf beside her and picked up a box of disposable gloves. "Inventory is simple. You count what's in front of you. You don't wander. You don't ask unrelated questions. You don't confuse a temporary assignment with permission to inspect the base." Maya wrote a number on her sheet. "Understood. Do you?" She looked at him. "I understand counting, sir." For a moment, Strickland seemed tempted to say more. Instead, he set the box down and gave Earl a thin smile. "Mr. Patterson, I hope you're not overwhelming our new helper with old stories." Earl answered without looking up. "Just supply numbers, sir." "Good. Numbers are safest when they stay where they belong." Strickland left. Only after his footsteps disappeared did Earl breathe again. Maya spoke quietly. He checks this office often? Only when somebody important is nervous. By late afternoon, Maya had enough small pieces to see a larger outline. Clara's notebook was not the imagination of a tired kitchen worker. Food had been diverted. Schedules had been changed. Staff who questioned missing supplies were punished. Brooks's name appeared beside missing witness statements. Vance's signature appeared where it should not have. Strickland's name appeared where silence needed maintenance. At 4:40 p.m., Mercer found Maya near the back stairwell of the administration building. He carried a stack of folders and looked like a man who had aged since breakfast. "You weren't supposed to talk to Earl Patterson," he said. "I was supposed to count inventory. You found something." "I found several somethings." Mercer glanced both ways down the hall. "Not here." They moved into a small records alcove where old filing cabinets stood under a humming vent. Maya handed him the copied requisition form and summarized Clara's notebook. Mercer read the paper twice. The color drained slowly from his face. "This connects Vance directly to the missing food allocations, and Clara's notes connect the missing food to retaliation. Still not enough." "I know." Mercer looked at her. "There's another meeting tomorrow morning. Discipline review. Brooks's file will come up again because you asked about it today." "Good. You keep saying that when things are not good. They are useful." He lowered his voice. "Major, Vance is going to come prepared. He'll bring the clean version of the file. Maybe a witness who says Brooks had performance issues. Maybe a memo saying you overstepped. He'll try to make you look emotional, political, inexperienced." Maya thought of Vance's boot near hers, his voice in the courtyard, the rag in her hand, the soldiers watching. "Then I'll let him try." Mercer stared at her, frustrated and afraid. "Why?" "Because men like him rehearse power," she said. "But when they feel challenged, they improvise. That's when they tell the truth." That evening, Maya stayed late in Administrative Office 3. The building emptied slowly around her. Phones stopped ringing. Doors closed. The cleaning crew moved down the hallway with a cart that squeaked at one wheel. Outside, the last light settled over Fort Redstone in a tired gold wash. On the desk before her lay three things: the official review packet, Earl Patterson's copied supply transfer, and photographs from Clara's notebook. The official packet said Fort Redstone had no pattern of retaliation. The handwritten notes said otherwise. The transfer form said resources had been moved for command comfort, while soldiers went without. Maya opened her legal pad and began building a timeline. Not a complaint. Not yet. A map. At the top, she wrote 4 names: Vance, Strickland, Brooks, Clara. Then she drew a line from missing food to punished workers, from harassment complaint to demotion, from altered paperwork to command approval. Slowly, the polished report began to lose its shine. A soft knock touched the doorframe. Maya looked up. The young female lieutenant from the meeting stood in the hall, face tense, one hand gripping a folder against her chest. "I can't stay," the lieutenant whispered. Maya did not move too quickly. "You don't have to." The lieutenant stepped inside just far enough to place the folder on the nearest chair. Sergeant Brooks wasn't the first. Then she turned and walked away before Maya could ask her name. Maya waited until the footsteps faded. Only then did she open the folder. Inside were 3 old complaint summaries, all closed, all marked insufficient evidence, all followed by disciplinary action against the person who reported misconduct. At the bottom of the last page was a handwritten note: "Check who signed the closures." Maya turned the page. Richard Vance had signed 2. Paul Strickland had signed the 3rd. The base was quiet now, but to Maya, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt crowded with voices, waiting for someone to make them safe. She placed the new folder beside Clara's pages and Earl's form. Colonel Vance thought he had sent her to supply to waste her time. Instead, he had sent her to the first locked door, and now, very carefully, Maya had found the key. The next morning arrived with the kind of quiet that made Fort Redstone feel almost innocent. A pale sun lifted over the old brick buildings, touching the parade ground, the flagpole, the motor pool, and the chapel steeple with the same gentle light. From a distance, the base looked peaceful, almost noble. Soldiers crossed the sidewalks with coffee in one hand and folders tucked beneath their arms. A pair of older veterans in ball caps stood near the visitor center, talking about a memorial ceremony planned for the weekend. Somewhere near the barracks, a cadence call rose and fell in the humid Georgia air. But Maya William had learned that peaceful places could still be built on fear. She reached Administrative Office 3 before 7. The building was mostly empty, the hallways smelling of floor wax and yesterday's coffee. She carried no weapon, no visible rank, no expression that would tell a passerby what she had found the night before. In her folder were photographs of Clara Mae Johnson's notebook, Earl Patterson's requisition copy, and the closed complaint summaries the young lieutenant had left behind like a confession she was too frightened to speak aloud. Maya placed everything on the small metal desk and began arranging the pieces again. Vance, Strickland, Brooks, Clara, missing food, punished workers, closed complaints, altered discipline, retaliation disguised as order. The pattern was becoming clearer, but it was not enough yet. A pattern could be denied. A notebook could be dismissed. A frightened lieutenant could recant. Earl Patterson could suddenly remember nothing. Clara could lose her job before she ever sat down with an investigator. Sergeant Brooks could be painted as bitter, unstable, and angry. Maya had seen that strategy before. Powerful men rarely needed to prove innocent people were lying. They only needed to make them look difficult. At 7:18, Captain Daniel Mercer appeared in the doorway with 2 paper cups of coffee and the tense face of a man who had not slept well. "You're early," he said. "So are you. I was afraid you'd be here." Maya accepted one of the cups. "That sounds like concern." "It is concern." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "And professional panic." She took a careful sip. The coffee was bitter enough to wake the dead. "Good. Panic keeps people alert." Mercer looked at the documents on the desk. "You stayed late." "I had company." His eyes sharpened. "What kind?" "A folder. No name attached." He set his cup down and leaned over the pages. As he read the old complaint summaries, his mouth tightened. "These are from before Brooks." "Yes. All closed as insufficient evidence, and all followed by discipline against the complainant." Mercer turned the last page and stared at the signature. Vance signed 2. Strickland signed 1. "That's not an accident." "No," Mercer said quietly. "That's a system." Maya watched him absorb the weight of his own words. It was one thing to suspect rot. It was another to see the shape of it, in ink. Mercer lowered his voice. "Major, this is enough to contact General Hensley." "No." He looked up sharply. "Maya." It was the first time he had used her first name. Fear had made him forget protocol. She did not correct him. "It's enough to raise concern. It is not enough to survive Vance's counterattack." "He's already counterattacking." "Then let him." Mercer shook his head. "You keep saying that, like he's just going to hand you a confession." "Not a confession," Maya said. "Behavior." Before Mercer could respond, voices moved in the hallway. 2 enlisted clerks passed by, discussing payroll corrections. Their footsteps faded. Mercer waited until they were gone. "The discipline review starts in 40 minutes, he said. Vance added Brooks to the agenda again. He also added, "You." Maya looked up from the file. "Me? Administrative conduct concern." That was fast. "He claims you questioned command authority, distracted civilian staff, and interfered with supply operations." Maya almost smiled. "I counted paper cups very aggressively." "This isn't funny." "No," she said. "It's useful." Mercer rubbed both hands over his face. "He's building a record against you." "Good." "Stop saying good. If he builds it honestly, it will show procedure. If he builds it falsely, it will show retaliation. And if he removes you from the base before you finish, then we make sure he tries in front of witnesses." Mercer stared at her, then slowly exhaled. "You really do know how to stand still." Maya gathered the Brooks file and slid the other documents beneath a plain administrative cover sheet. "I told you. I learned early." At 8, conference room 2 began filling with the same careful silence Maya had heard the day before. Sergeant Major Avery arrived first, carrying a worn leather portfolio. Then Lieutenant Colonel Strickland entered, expression smooth and unreadable. The young female lieutenant was already seated at the far end of the table, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Maya did not look at her too long. Fear noticed attention. Colonel Vance entered last. He did not sit immediately. He stood at the head of the table, letting the room adjust itself around his presence. That was one of his habits, Maya realized. He wanted people to feel him before he spoke. "Well," he said, his eyes landing on Maya. "I see our administrative observer has survived supply inventory." "Yes, sir. Learn anything useful?" "A great deal." Strickland's gaze flicked toward Vance. Vance sat slowly. "Then let's make sure you understand one lesson clearly. Observation is not authority. Curiosity is not jurisdiction. And paperwork does not outrank command." Maya opened her folder. Understood. The meeting began with routine items, but the routine felt staged. 2 minor disciplinary cases were reviewed quickly, both involving young soldiers who had missed formation or failed room inspection. Vance handled them with theatrical disappointment, speaking about standards, accountability, and the sacred trust of military order. He seemed to enjoy the words. They made cruelty sound patriotic. Then Strickland slid a folder forward. Next item. Sergeant Layla Brooks. The young lieutenant at the end of the table went still. Vance leaned back. As noted yesterday, Brooks was demoted for documented performance and conduct issues unrelated to her complaint. Maya turned a page. "May I see the witness interview records?" Strickland answered before Vance could. "The relevant findings are summarized in the packet. I asked for the interview records." Vance's voice cooled. "And you were told, the matter is closed. Closed matters still have records. Not all records are available to temporary administrative personnel." Maya looked at him. "Then, who approved my review access?" Avery shifted slightly in his chair. Mercer, seated near the wall, looked down at his notes to hide his expression. Vance smiled. "You're very fond of questions. Only when answers are missing." That landed harder than she intended, or perhaps exactly as hard as it needed to. Vance placed both hands on the table. "Let me explain something to you, Miss William. Sergeant Brooks was not punished for filing a complaint. She was punished because she became disruptive, emotional, and unwilling to accept correction. There is a difference between being wronged and refusing discipline." Maya's eyes remained steady. "What correction did she refuse?" Strickland's jaw tightened. Vance said, "She refused to stop making accusations that damaged unit cohesion. So she was disciplined for continuing to discuss the harassment complaint." "No. She was disciplined for insubordination." "Was the alleged insubordination before or after she asked why her witness statement was missing?" The room went silent. For the first time that morning, Vance did not answer immediately. Maya turned another page. "Was it before or after she requested outside review?" The young lieutenant's breathing became shallow. Vance looked toward Strickland. Strickland looked at the file. Neither man spoke. Sergeant Major Avery finally said, very carefully, "That date is not in the summary." Maya nodded once. "That is part of the problem." Vance's face hardened. "The problem is that you entered this installation with an agenda. The problem is that a harassment complaint appears to have triggered punishment. You don't know that. I know the dates. Dates don't tell the whole story." "No," Maya said. "That's why I asked for the missing interviews." Avery's eyes lifted to her, and for one brief second, Maya saw something like respect. Not open support. Not yet. But respect was the first crack in fear. Vance stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. "This review is becoming disruptive," he said. "Effective immediately, Miss Williams' access will be limited to documents pre-selected by my office. She will not speak to soldiers, civilian workers, or command staff without approval from Lieutenant Colonel Strickland." Mercer looked up. "Sir, that may conflict with the regional notice." Vance turned on him. "Captain Mercer, I suggest you remember where your office is located." Mercer went quiet, but his pen kept moving. Maya closed her folder. "Is that a formal order, Colonel?" Vance stared at her. The room seemed to hold its breath. "If you want to restrict review access," Maya continued, "I'll need the order in writing, with the reason stated." Strickland spoke quickly. "That won't be necessary. Maya looked at him. Then, access is not restricted? Vance's anger flashed hot enough to burn through the polished surface of his face. He had wanted obedience. She had given him procedure. He had wanted fear. She had given him paperwork. Finally, he said. Meeting adjourned. No one moved at first. Then papers shuffled. Chairs slid back. People stood too quickly, eager to escape before the walls absorbed their names. Maya gathered her folder slowly. As she reached the hallway, the young female lieutenant passed close beside her and whispered without moving her lips. Motor pool. Noon. Then she was gone. Mercer joined Maya near the water fountain, his face tense. You got him to threaten restriction. In front of everyone. He stopped before making it written. Because you trapped him. No, Maya said. Because he knows written orders can bleed. Mercer glanced down the hall where Vance and Strickland had disappeared. Motor pool at noon? Maya did not ask how he knew. The hallway had ears, but Mercer had learned to read faces. At noon, she said. He lowered his voice. That lieutenant is risking her career. Then we make sure her risk matters. Outside, the day had grown hotter. Heat shimmered above the pavement as Maya crossed toward the motor pool just before noon. Trucks sat in long rows behind a chain-link fence. Mechanics moved between them with grease on their sleeves and sweat darkening their collars. The place smelled of diesel, rubber, sun-baked metal, and hard work. Near the far end of the lot, beside a Humvee with its hood raised, the young lieutenant waited with a clipboard pressed to her chest. My name is Lieutenant Hannah Price, she said before Maya could ask. Her voice was low, urgent. I don't have much time. Maya stopped a few feet away, giving her space. You don't have to do this. Yes, Price said, eyes shining with fear and anger. I do. She handed Maya a folded maintenance request. On the back, written in small, precise letters, were 3 names and 1 sentence. Brooks was not the first because the first one disappeared from the file. Maya looked up. Lieutenant Price swallowed. There was another woman, Specialist Dana Whitaker. She reported the same NCO 8 months before Brooks. Her complaint was closed. Then she was transferred out after a mental fitness review she never requested. Who ordered the review? Price's eyes moved toward the administration building across the yard. Strickland signed it, she said, but Vance ordered it. A truck engine roared to life nearby, loud enough to cover the silence that followed. Maya folded the paper and slipped it into her folder. The case had just changed. It was no longer one retaliation. It was a chain. The roar of the truck engine covered the silence between Maya, William, and Lieutenant Hannah Price, but it did not soften what had just been said. Specialist Dana Whitaker. Another complaint. Another closed file. Another woman pushed out of sight. Maya kept the folded maintenance request in her folder and looked across the motor pool toward the administration building. Through the heat shimmer, the old brick structure seemed steady and harmless, but Maya was beginning to understand how many lives had been bent inside its rooms. Where is Specialist Whitaker now? Maya asked. Price glanced over her shoulder. A mechanic rolled a tire past them, pretending not to listen. Kentucky, last I heard. She was transferred to a training support unit after the mental fitness review. People said she broke down. That's what the file said. What did you see? Price tightened her grip on the clipboard. I saw a soldier who filed a complaint and got treated like a liability. 1 week, she was squared away. The next week, everyone was told not to discuss her situation because it was a privacy matter. Did she have witnesses? Yes. 2. 1 left the army. The other still works here. Name? Price hesitated. Maya did not press. She had learned long ago that fear had to be approached like an injured animal. Too much force, and it bit the person trying to help. Price swallowed. Luis Ortega, motor pool mechanic. Civilian contractor now, but he was active duty back then. He saw what happened after Whitaker complained. Maya followed her gaze toward an older man in grease-stained coveralls checking the open hood of a Humvee. He was in his early 50s, thick through the shoulders, with silver at his temples and a limp he tried to hide by moving slowly. His name patch read Ortega. He'll deny it if I walk over there with you, Price said. He has a daughter at Georgia State. He needs this job. Then you should go, Maya said. Price blinked. Just like that? Just like that. You gave me a name. Don't give Vance a reason to notice you gave me anything else. For the first time, something like relief crossed Price's face, mixed with guilt. I should be braver. Maya's voice softened. You're standing here. Price looked away quickly, the way people did when kindness came too close to an old wound. Be careful with Ortega. He trusts slow. So do I. Price nodded once and walked toward the operations shed, her boots striking the gravel in quick, controlled steps. Maya waited until she was gone before moving toward the Humvee. Luis Ortega did not look up when she approached. If you're here about inventory, the forms are inside. I'm not here about inventory. Then you're in the wrong place. I'm looking into old complaint records. That made him still. Only for half a second. But enough. He wiped his hands on a rag and lowered the hood. Lady, everybody on this base is always looking into something. Then, they look away. Maya stood beside the Humvee, leaving enough space between them for him to walk away if he chose. Did you know Specialist Dana Whitaker? His face closed. Haven't heard that name in a while. That's usually what happens when a file is cleaned too well. Ortega gave her a hard look. You jag? Maya did not answer directly. Would that change what you tell me? It would change how fast I get fired after I tell you. I'm not asking you to speak on record today. Then what are you asking? To know where to look. He stared toward the line of trucks baking in the sun. Somewhere nearby, country music played softly from a radio, low enough to be denied if a superior officer walked by. A younger mechanic laughed, then stopped when he saw Ortega's face. Ortega lowered his voice. Whitaker came to me because one of the staff sergeants kept cornering her near the tool cage. She had texts. She had dates. She had another soldier willing to back her. She filed through the proper channel. 2 days later, Strickland's office called her in. After that, she wasn't the same. What changed? They started documenting everything. Late by 3 minutes. Uniform not pressed enough. Tone disrespectful. Didn't respond fast enough to a correction. You know how paperwork works when somebody wants to build a coffin out of it. Maya wrote nothing. Not yet. She let him speak. Then came the mental fitness review. Ortega continued. They said she was unstable. Said she had emotional reactions that raised concerns. I saw that girl pull a transmission part in 100-degree heat, with 3 men, twice her size, complaining beside her. She wasn't unstable. She was tired of being hunted. Maya felt the words settle into the same place Clara's notebook had settled. Who signed the paperwork? Strickland signed. Vance approved. Everybody knew. Everybody? Ortega looked at her then, and his eyes were full of the exhausted anger of a man who had watched too much and saved too little. Everybody who mattered. Nobody who cared. Before Maya could answer, a white pickup rolled slowly past the motor pool fence. Lieutenant Colonel Strickland sat in the passenger seat. He did not wave. He did not need to. His gaze moved from Ortega to Maya and stayed there just long enough to turn the moment into a warning. Ortega stepped back from the Humvee. We're done. Maya nodded. Thank you. I didn't say anything. No, she said. You told me where to look. He turned away, but after 2 steps, he stopped. Without facing her, he said, Old maintenance office. Bottom drawer. Whitaker left copies before she transferred. Nobody checked because nobody thinks mechanics keep paper. Then he walked into the garage. Maya crossed the lot slowly, feeling Strickland's eyes, even after the pickup disappeared. She knew better than to go straight to the maintenance office while being watched. Instead, she returned to Administrative Office 3, filed 3 meaningless inventory sheets, answered 2 routine emails under her cover assignment, and waited. Waiting was not inaction. Sometimes waiting was how evidence survived. At 2:30, Mercer entered with a stack of folders and closed the door behind him. You were seen with Ortega, he said. I assumed. Strickland asked why you were in the motor pool. What did you say? That Vance assigned you to supply. And supply includes motor pool consumables. Good answer. It bought maybe an hour. I need access to the old maintenance office. Mercer's expression tightened. Why? Dana Whitaker. He closed his eyes briefly. I was afraid that name would come up. You knew? I knew something happened. I didn't know enough to prove it. Her transfer came through fast. Too fast. After that, people stopped mentioning her. Ortega says she left copies. Mercer looked toward the door, then back at Maya. The old maintenance office is used for archived work orders. No cameras inside, but there's one in the hall. Can it be avoided? Not without making it obvious. Then we don't avoid it. We make our reason boring. 20 minutes later, Maya walked beside Mercer, down a narrow corridor smelling of dust, motor oil, and old cardboard. He carried a requisition checklist. She carried a box of outdated forms. Anyone watching would see two administrative workers doing exactly the kind of dull task no one wanted. The old maintenance office was cramped, dim, and hotter than the hallway. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A broken desk sat near the window with a dead fly trapped inside the sill. Mercer stood by the door while Maya moved to the bottom drawer of the oldest cabinet. It stuck halfway. She pulled harder. The drawer opened with a metallic groan. Inside were work orders, tire replacement logs, inspection sheets, and at the very back, a manila envelope with no label. Maya opened it carefully. The first page was a printed email from specialist Dana Whitaker requesting protection from retaliation. The second was a text message screenshot. The third was a statement naming the same senior NCO Brooks had later accused. Beneath those was a memorandum recommending mental fitness review, signed by Paul Strickland and approved by Richard Vance. Mercer whispered, "Dear God." Maya kept turning pages. There were handwritten notes in the margin. Dates, times, names of witnesses. One line had been underlined twice. "If anything happens to my file, ask why Colonel Vance was copied before the investigation opened." Maya photographed each page with the secure device. Her hands remained steady, but something cold moved through her chest. Not surprise, confirmation, the kind that made anger quiet and permanent. Mercer looked sick. Brooks really wasn't the first. "No," Maya said. She was the next. A sound came from the hallway. Both of them froze. Footsteps stopped outside the door. Then Strickland's voice came through, smooth and close. "Captain Mercer? Miss William? Interesting place for administrative review." Mercer's face drained of color. Maya slid the envelope beneath the outdated forms and lifted the box into her arms before turning toward the door. Strickland stood there with two military police officers behind him. His smile was thin. "Colonel Vance would like to see you both." Maya met his eyes. Of course. As they stepped into the hallway, Maya could feel the envelope hidden beneath the forms, pressed against her side like a heartbeat. Vance had begun closing doors, but he still did not understand. Maya had already learned where the hinges were. The walk from the old maintenance office to Colonel Vance's command suite was not long, but Vance had arranged it to feel that way. Lieutenant Colonel Strickland walked ahead with the calm satisfaction of a man who believed the trap had closed. The two military police officers followed a few steps behind Maya and Captain Mercer, close enough to make the message clear but not close enough to call it an arrest. That was how men like Vance preferred to operate, Maya thought. Not open enough to be challenged, not clean enough to be lawful, just enough pressure to make frightened people comply. Mercer kept his eyes forward. His jaw was tight. Maya could feel the tension coming off him, but he did not speak. Speaking in the hallway would only give Strickland something to use. Instead, Maya carried the box of outdated forms against her ribs, the manila envelope hidden beneath them, warm from the heat of her body and heavy with Dana Whitaker's erased truth. They passed two civilian clerks near the copy room. The women stopped talking. One looked at Maya, then quickly looked away. Down another hallway, a young specialist stepped aside so fast his shoulder bumped the wall. By the time they reached the command suite, the news had already begun moving through Fort Redstone without a sound. Miss William had been escorted by MPs. Captain Mercer was with her. Strickland had found them somewhere they were not supposed to be. That was exactly what Vance wanted people to hear. The colonel's outer office was cool enough to feel theatrical. A receptionist sat behind a polished desk, hands folded, face blank. Behind her, the walls were lined with framed photographs of ceremonies, promotions, ribbon cuttings, and charity events. In one picture, Vance smiled beside a group of schoolchildren holding miniature American flags. In another, he stood behind a Thanksgiving table, carving turkey for soldiers as if generosity were one of his official decorations. Maya looked at the photographs and thought of Clara's notebook. Public virtue, private hunger. The receptionist opened the inner door without being asked. "Colonel Vance is expecting you." Of course he was. Vance stood behind his desk when they entered. He did not invite them to sit. His office smelled faintly of leather, furniture polish, and strong coffee. A ceremonial saber hung on the wall behind him. A Bible rested on a shelf near a framed citation for leadership excellence. Everything in the room had been arranged to make authority feel permanent. Strickland moved to Vance's right side. The MPs remained just inside the door. Vance looked first at Mercer, then at Maya. His eyes settled on the box in her arms. "Miss William, you do have a talent for wandering into places that don't concern you." Maya kept her voice mild. "Captain Mercer was helping me locate archived maintenance forms for supply reconciliation." "Supply reconciliation." Vance repeated the phrase, as if tasting something spoiled. "In the old maintenance office." "Yes, sir." "And what exactly does an administrative helper know about archived maintenance forms?" "Enough to carry a box." One of the MPs shifted his weight. Mercer stared at the floor, fighting the instinct to react. Vance's expression hardened. "Careful." Maya said nothing. That irritated him more. Strickland stepped in smoothly. "Colonel, given the ongoing concerns regarding unauthorized access, I recommend we inspect the materials Miss William removed from the office." Mercer lifted his head. "Sir, if you're alleging unauthorized removal, we need to identify the specific regulation and create a written record of the inspection." Vance turned slowly toward him. "Captain, your sudden enthusiasm for procedure is becoming tiresome." Mercer swallowed, but his voice held. "Procedure protects everyone." "Sir." "No," Vance said. "Procedure protects the mission from people who think rules are toys." Maya could feel the moment narrowing. If she refused the inspection, Vance would accuse her of concealment. If she handed over the box, Strickland might find Dana Whitaker's envelope and bury it before the day ended. She had seconds, not minutes, so she did what Vance expected least. She stepped forward and placed the box on his desk. "Please inspect it, sir." Mercer's eyes flicked toward her in alarm. Vance smiled. He reached into the box and lifted the first stack of outdated requisition forms. Then another. Cleaning supply logs. Old tire request sheets. Blank inventory checklists. Maya had arranged the top layers carefully while walking, sliding the envelope flat beneath a bundle of obsolete carbon copy forms with curled edges and faded print. Strickland moved closer. Vance pulled out a handful of papers and tossed them back. "This is garbage." "Yes, sir," Maya said. "Archived garbage." He stared at her, hearing the faint edge beneath the obedience, but unable to grab it without cutting himself. Strickland reached for the bottom layer. Before his fingers touched it, the office phone rang. The receptionist's voice came through the speaker. "Colonel, Sergeant Major Avery is here. He says it's urgent." Vance's jaw tightened. "Tell him I'm busy." A pause. Then Avery's voice came through from the outer office, older, firm, and unusually loud. "Sir, it concerns the Regional Command Review Notice." "Sir." Vance looked furious. He stabbed the speaker button. "Wait outside." "With respect, Colonel," Avery said. "General Hensley's office is on the line." The room changed. It was subtle, but Maya felt it. Vance's hand paused above the box. Strickland's eyes sharpened. Mercer inhaled, slowly. General Hensley's office. Not Hensley herself, most likely. A staff aide. A procedural call. Maybe nothing. But it had arrived at the exact second Strickland's hand reached for the hidden envelope. And in a place like Fort Redstone, timing could feel like providence. Vance stepped around the desk and picked up the receiver. "This is Colonel Vance." He listened. His face did not move, but his color changed slightly. "Yes," he said. "We are cooperating fully." Another pause. "No, there has been no restriction of access. Administrative support personnel are being properly supervised." Maya kept her eyes down. Vance's voice tightened. "Of course, we'll provide the requested acknowledgement by close of business." He hung up. For a moment, No one spoke. Then he turned toward Maya with a colder kind of anger. You are dismissed to your assigned workspace. Captain Mercer, you will remain. Mercer's face tightened. Maya picked up the box before Vance could change his mind. Yes, sir. Strickland watched her leave, his expression unreadable. The MPs stepped aside. Maya walked through the outer office, past Sergeant Major Avery, who stood near the receptionist's desk with a phone message slip in one hand. He did not look at her directly. He only said, Careful carrying old paper, Miss William. Some of it cuts deep. Maya continued down the hall without slowing. She did not breathe fully until she reached the women's restroom near the south stairwell. She entered, checked the stalls, locked herself inside the farthest one, and set the box on the closed toilet lid. Her hands moved quickly now. She lifted the top papers, pulled out Dana Whitaker's envelope, and slid it beneath her blouse into the flat document pouch Mercer had given her that morning. Then she returned the remaining papers to the box and washed her hands like any ordinary employee after a dull errand. When she looked in the mirror, she saw no triumph in her face, only focus. Mercer was still inside Vance's office. Avery had bought her time. The phone call from Hensley's office meant someone outside the base was paying attention, but not enough yet. Not nearly enough. She needed Brooks. Maya found Clara near the rear kitchen entrance 20 minutes later. The lunch rush was over, and the older woman was sealing leftover cornbread in plastic wrap. You look like somebody who just walked past a grave and heard knocking, Clara said. Maya placed the empty supply box on a nearby cart. I need to find Sergeant Brooks. Clara's eyes darkened. Layla doesn't talk to strangers. I'm not asking as a stranger. No, but she doesn't know that. Where is she? Clara looked toward the hallway, then lowered her voice. Laundry building. She helps there on rotation since the demotion. That was part of the punishment. Took her out of her unit, put her where everybody could see how far she fell. Maya nodded. Thank you. Clara touched her wrist before she could leave. Baby, that girl has been carrying a fire with no chimney. Don't open the door, unless you're ready for the smoke. The laundry building sat behind the barracks, a long, low structure that smelled of detergent, damp cotton, and hot machines. Inside, dryers hummed and washers thumped unevenly against old concrete. Soldiers came and went with mesh bags over their shoulders, most too tired or too young to notice Maya standing near the folding tables. Sergeant Layla Brooks stood at the far end, folding gray PT shirts into precise squares. She was in her early 30s, with steady hands, tired eyes, and the posture of someone who refused to let humiliation bend her spine. Her rank patch told one story, her face told another. Maya approached slowly. Sergeant Brooks? Brooks did not look up. Depends who's asking. Maya William. That name supposed to mean something? Not yet. Brooks folded another shirt. Then, I've got laundry. I saw part of your file. Now, Brooks looked at her. The machines kept running. A dryer door clicked shut somewhere behind them. Brooks's voice dropped. Then you saw a lie wearing my name. Maya stood across the table from her. I saw missing interviews, a demotion after a harassment complaint, and a pattern that started before you. Something flickered in Brooks's eyes at that last part. Pain, maybe, or the bitter relief of learning she had not imagined the trap. Dana Whitaker, Brooks said. Yes. Brooks looked away. They told me not to say her name. Who? Everybody who wanted to keep breathing easy. Maya waited. Brooks pressed her palms flat on the folded shirt. You jag? Maya did not answer immediately. The question hung between them, dangerous and necessary. Finally, she said, I am here under authority of a regional review. Brooks gave a humorless smile. That's a yes with a helmet on. Maya almost smiled back. It's the safest answer I can give you in this room. Brooks studied her for a long moment. If I talk, they'll say I'm angry. You are. If I talk, they'll say I'm unstable. You're not. If I talk, they'll say I stole records. Did you? Brooks reached beneath the stack of folded shirts and pulled out a small key taped to the cardboard backing of a detergent box. Her hand trembled only once. I kept what they forgot to erase, she said. Maya looked at the key. Outside, a truck passed the laundry building, rattling the windows in their frames. Brooks's voice grew quieter. There's a locker by the old gym. Number 17. Emails, a recording, copies of my original statement, and something else. What else? Brooks swallowed. A memo with Vance copied before my complaint was officially opened. The machines kept humming, steady and indifferent. Maya closed her hand around the key. The chain had a second link now, and this one still had a voice. Maya closed her hand around the small key, feeling the cool metal press into her palm. For a moment, neither she nor Sergeant Layla Brooks spoke. The laundry machines kept turning around them, filling the room with a low mechanical thunder that made their silence feel protected. Brooks slid another folded shirt onto the stack, though Maya could tell she no longer saw what her hands were doing. Locker 17, Maya said quietly. Old gym, Brooks answered. Back hallway. Nobody uses those lockers much, except staff, who don't want their things searched. Why not keep the documents with you? Brooks gave her a look that was almost pity. Because they already searched my room once after I filed the complaint. Said it was a random health and welfare inspection. They found nothing, but they wanted me to know they could open any drawer I owned. Maya slipped the key into the inner pocket of her folder. Who ordered the search? Strickland signed it. Vance called it Command Climate Maintenance. Command Climate, Maya repeated. Brooks laughed under her breath. That's what they call the weather, when they're the ones making it storm. Maya studied her. There were people who cried when they were hurt. There were people who shouted. And then there were people like Brooks, who packed the hurt into neat corners and carried it until their shoulders forgot what lightness felt like. I need to ask you something directly, Maya said. If this goes forward, they may try to make you the problem again. They already did. They may do it harder. Brooks looked toward the washers, where a soldier's uniform spun behind cloudy glass. I know. You don't have to hand me anything today. That made Brooks look back at her sharply. You think I gave you that key because I wanted one more night to be scared? No. I think you gave it to me because you're done being alone with the truth. For the first time, Brooks's face changed. Not soft, exactly, but less guarded. Like a locked door had opened an inch. My daughter asked me last month why I don't wear my old stripes anymore, Brooks said. She's 7. She still thinks rank is just something they give good soldiers, like stickers in school. Her mouth tightened. I told her I made some people uncomfortable. She asked if telling the truth was bad manners. Maya felt that sentence settle deep. What did you tell her? I told her telling the truth is only bad manners to people who need lies to stay comfortable. The laundry room door opened, and both women stopped. A young soldier came in with a mesh bag over one shoulder, saw Brooks, saw Maya, and immediately looked away. He shoved his clothes into a washer with exaggerated focus. Fear had made everyone on Fort Redstone a performer. Maya lowered her voice. Stay on your routine. Don't change anything. Don't speak to me again in public unless I approach you first. Brooks nodded. You think they're watching? I know they are. They don't know about the locker. Then we keep it that way. Maya left the laundry building without looking back. Outside, the heat struck her like an opened oven. The old gym sat across a cracked service road, beyond a row of live oaks and a faded sign warning personnel not to park along the fire lane. Once, it had probably been the pride of the base, a place of basketball games, retirement ceremonies, and holiday drives. Now the paint peeled at the corners, and one side entrance had a chain looped through the handles. She did not go straight there. Instead, she walked toward the administrative wing, took the long route past the chapel, stopped at a bulletin board to read a flyer about a veteran's pancake breakfast, then crossed near the library annex. Anyone following from a distance would see a new administrative worker still learning the base, not a JAG officer carrying a key to a hidden archive. At the corner near the old gym, Captain Mercer appeared from the shade of a parked government sedan. He looked like he had been waiting without wanting to be seen waiting. Vance kept me for 40 minutes, he said. He asked what you removed from maintenance. Old forms? Did he believe that? No. Mercer glanced at the gym. Please tell me you're not about to make my afternoon worse. I have a key. He closed his eyes briefly. Of course you do. Locker 17. From Brooks? Maya did not answer. She did not need to. Mercer looked around the quiet lot. There's a camera over the main entrance. Back hallway camera has been out for months. Maintenance request pending. How convenient. Nothing on this base stays broken unless it helps someone. They entered through a side door Mercer unlocked with a facilities pass he had obtained for records routing. The gym smelled of dust, rubber mats, old sweat, and the faint sweetness of floor wax. Their footsteps echoed across the empty basketball court. Sunlight came through high windows in pale rectangles, catching dust in the air like suspended ash. The back hallway was lined with lockers, most dented and forgotten. Number 17 sat near the end, half hidden behind a stack of folded wrestling mats. Maya inserted the key. The lock turned. Inside was a brown accordion folder wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. Brooks had taped it beneath the upper shelf, where no one would see it unless they knew to reach. Maya took it down carefully and handed the bag to Mercer, while she checked the locker for anything else. "Clear," she said. Mercer opened the folder on a wooden bench. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, handwritten notes, a USB drive, and photocopies of official memoranda. The first email was Brooks's original harassment complaint. The second showed it had been forwarded to Strickland's office before the formal intake number was assigned. The third was more damning. It showed Vance copied on a message discussing Brooks as a command disruption risk before anyone had interviewed her. Mercer's face went pale. They decided what she was before they investigated what happened. Maya picked up a memo dated 2 days before Brooks's demotion. It recommended corrective disciplinary action to restore unit cohesion. The language was clean. The intent beneath it was filthy. Then Mercer found the recording. The USB drive was labeled only with a strip of tape and the letter B. He pulled a small, secure laptop from his bag, connected the drive, and opened the audio file. For a moment, only static played. Then, Strickland's voice filled the empty gym hallway, thin and unmistakable. "If Brooks keeps pushing, others will think complaints are a negotiation tool." Another voice answered, deeper, colder. "Vance. Then make her the example. Quietly. Nothing dramatic. Just enough that the next one thinks twice." Mercer froze. On the recording, Strickland said, "Harassment intake is already logged. Then, separate the discipline packet." Vance replied, "Make it about attitude. They always give you attitude if you wait long enough." Maya did not move. Dust drifted in the sunlight beside her. Then Vance's voice came again. "And check whether Whitaker's name is still connected anywhere. I don't want old ghosts walking into a new complaint." The audio ended. The gym seemed to hold the last sentence long after the speaker went silent. Mercer slowly closed the laptop. "That's obstruction. That's retaliation. That's a direct link to Whitaker. And Brooks." He looked at Maya. "We send this now." "Not yet, Maya." She turned to him. He talked about examples. "That means there are more than 2. Mercer stepped closer, his voice tight. "We have enough to get Hensley's office involved. We have enough to get them interested. I need enough that Vance can't explain it away as 1 bad conversation and 2 disgruntled soldiers." Mercer shook his head. "You are running out of time." "I know. No, I mean it literally. Vance ordered you to report to his office at 1600 for an administrative conduct counseling." Maya looked at him. "Did he put it in writing?" "Yes." That stopped her. Mercer took a folded paper from his folder. "He claims your behavior has become disruptive, that you've exceeded your assigned administrative duties, and that you may be attempting to access restricted materials." Maya read the memo once. The language was exactly what she expected. Polished, procedural, dishonest. "He's building the paper trail," she said. "Against you." "No. For me." Mercer stared at her. She folded the memo and placed it beside Brooks's documents. "He is retaliating against someone engaged in a protected review, and he's documenting it himself. You're enjoying this too much. I'm not enjoying any of it." And she wasn't. Not really. Beneath her calm, anger had become a steady flame. She thought of Brooks's daughter asking whether truth was bad manners. She thought of Clara hiding history inside a recipe binder. She thought of Dana Whitaker leaving copies in a forgotten office because she knew someone would try to erase her. Maya packed the documents carefully. "Make secure copies. Not on the base network. I can do that. Send a preservation alert draft to General Hensley's office, but do not transmit it until I say. Mercer hesitated. And where will you be? At 1600? Maya looked toward the gym doors and the bright heat beyond them. I'll be in Colonel Vance's office, letting him add one more page to his own file. At exactly 4 o'clock, Maya entered Vance's command suite alone. The receptionist would not meet her eyes. Strickland stood near the inner door, waiting with that smooth, bloodless expression of his. He's ready for you, Strickland said. Maya stepped inside. Colonel Vance sat behind his desk, the administrative counseling memo placed neatly before him. He did not rise. He did not offer a chair. Miss William, he said, you've had a busy day. Yes, sir. He tapped the memo with one finger. That ends now. Maya stood still. Vance leaned back, studying her the way a man might study a locked gate before deciding whether to kick it open. You ask too many questions. You wander too much. You speak to people who have no business filling your head with complaints. I don't know who made you think you were special, but on this base, I decide how far people go. Maya said nothing. His voice lowered. You want to be a symbol? Fine. I can make you one. By tomorrow morning, every office on this base will know you were removed for misconduct before your little review even began. He expected fear. He expected a protest. He expected her to explain herself. Maya only looked at the memo. May I have a copy for my records, sir? Vance smiled coldly. Of course. I want you to remember it. He signed the bottom with a hard stroke of his pen and slid the paper across the desk. Maya picked it up. The ink was still wet, and for the first time all day, she felt the case move from suspicion into proof. Maya left Colonel Vance's office with the signed counseling memo held flat inside her folder, careful not to smudge the ink. Behind her, she could feel Vance's satisfaction following her into the hallway. He believed the paper weakened her. He believed a signature from his hand could turn her from observer into offender. That was the problem with men who had used paperwork as a weapon for too long. They forgot paperwork could cut both ways. Strickland was waiting outside the door, hands folded in front of him, expression smooth as polished stone. I trust the colonel made expectations clear. He was very clear, Maya said. Good. Clarity prevents misunderstandings. No, Maya replied. It preserves them. His eyes narrowed slightly. Excuse me? Maya gave him a polite nod and continued down the hallway before he could decide whether to challenge her. She did not hurry. Hurrying looked like fear. She walked past the receptionist, past the framed photographs of smiling commanders, past the little table with the fake plant and the bowl of wrapped peppermints for visitors. Every object in that office seemed arranged to say that Fort Redstone was orderly, kind, and safe. Maya now carried proof that it was not. Captain Mercer was waiting in Administrative Office 3 when she arrived. He had the blinds half closed and the desk lamp on, though daylight still hung outside the window. The room smelled of old paper and coffee that had sat too long on a warmer. On the desk, arranged in careful stacks, were the digital copies from Brooks's locker, the photographs of Clara's notebook, Earl Patterson's requisition form, Dana Whitaker's documents, and the folder left by Lieutenant Price. Mercer looked up the moment she entered. Well? Maya slid the counseling memo across the desk. He read it once, then again. By the third line, his face had gone tight with anger. He actually signed it. With enthusiasm. Mercer looked at the bottom of the page. He accuses you of disruptive behavior, unauthorized questioning, interference with command functions, and possible access to restricted materials. And he issued it after I asked about Brooks, Whitaker, missing interviews, and altered records. Mercer lowered the memo slowly. This is retaliation. Yes. Against a protected review. Yes. And he put it in writing. Maya took off her temporary badge and set it beside the memo. Now we have his hand on the knife. Mercer let out a breath that sounded almost like disbelief. You knew he'd do this. I knew he might. Men like Vance believe official language makes cruelty disappear. A knock sounded at the door before Mercer could respond. Both of them froze. Maya gathered the exposed documents into one stack with calm efficiency. Mercer opened the drawer, swept the USB drive and printed copies inside, then closed it with his knee as the knock came again. "Come in," Maya called. Sergeant Major Thomas Avery stepped inside and shut the door behind him. For a moment, he said nothing. He was still in uniform, still carrying himself with the old discipline of a career soldier. But something in his face had shifted. The careful neutrality from the meeting was gone. What remained was exhaustion. "I don't have long," Avery said. Mercer stood. "Sergeant Major." Avery lifted a hand. "Captain, I know what I'm doing. Or at least I know what I should have done years ago." Maya watched him closely. "What changed?" Avery looked at her temporary badge on the desk. "This morning, when Colonel Vance ordered you restricted, you asked if it was formal. He wouldn't say it. I've heard him do that 100 times. Threats without signatures. Punishments without names. Everybody knows what he means, but nobody can prove what he said." He reached inside his portfolio and removed a sealed envelope. "This is not everything," he said, "but it is enough to tell you where to look." Maya did not touch it yet. "Why give it to me?" Avery's eyes dropped for a second. "Because my grandson ships out next month. He's 19. Still thinks the uniform makes every man honorable. I would like that to be true by the time he learns. It isn't automatic." The room went very quiet. Mercer spoke softly. "What's in the envelope?" "Copies of disciplinary routing sheets. Names of soldiers whose complaints were closed, then followed by adverse action. Internal emails showing Strickland rerouted certain files away from legal review. And a list of civilian employees whose hours were cut after reporting supply or conduct issues." Maya picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. Avery turned toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. Vance has ordered an after-hours file audit tonight." Mercer stiffened. "What kind of audit?" "The kind where inconvenient paper stops existing." Maya's eyes sharpened. "Who's conducting it?" "Strickland. 2 clerks from Command Admin, and a systems technician named Powell. They'll start after 2200. "Where?" "Records Annex B." Mercer swore under his breath. Avery looked at Maya. "If you're going to preserve anything, Major, do it before then." The use of her rank landed in the room like a quiet salute. Avery opened the door and left before either of them could thank him. Maya waited until his footsteps faded. Then she opened the envelope. The contents were exactly what Avery promised, and worse than Mercer feared. Names repeated across different categories. A female medic who reported harassment received 3 counseling statements in 10 days. A Latino supply clerk who questioned missing equipment was reassigned to night inventory. A black staff sergeant who challenged an evaluation was flagged for attitude inconsistent with command climate. Civilian workers who complained about food diversion saw their hours reduced. At the bottom of one routing sheet, Maya saw a handwritten instruction in blue ink. "Keep JAG out, unless required." The initials beside it were P.S. Paul Strickland. Mercer leaned over the page. "That's deliberate legal avoidance. That's consciousness of guilt." He looked at the clock. "It's almost 6. If they start deleting at 10, we have 4 hours. Less," Maya said. "Assume they start early." She took out a clean legal pad and began writing a preservation list. Brooks file, Whitaker file, complaint intake logs, disciplinary actions following complaints, civilian staffing review changes, supply transfer approvals, email routing from Strickland, command access logs, night audit order. Mercer watched the list grow. "We need system records. Can you get them?" "Not directly without triggering alerts." "Who can?" He hesitated. "Powell. The technician Avery named?" "Yes. Staff Sergeant Eli Powell. He runs half the back-end record systems. Quiet guy. Keeps to himself. If Strickland pulled him in, it's because he knows where the bodies are buried." "Will he talk?" Mercer's face was grim. "Not if he thinks he's alone." "Then show him he isn't." They found Powell in the server room behind communications. A narrow, chilled space filled with blinking lights, locked cabinets, and the steady hum of machines preserving the base's official memory. He was in his 40s, thin, nervous, with a wedding ring and a small silver cross hanging at his neck. His eyes moved immediately to Mercer, then to Maya, then to the security camera in the corner. "I'm busy," Powell said. Mercer closed the door. "Eli, we know about tonight's audit." Powell's face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." Maya spoke gently. "Staff Sergeant, Colonel Vance and Lieutenant Colonel Strickland are preparing to alter or remove records connected to an authorized regional review. If you participate, they will call it an order today and make it your crime tomorrow." Powell swallowed. Mercer stepped closer. "They'll protect themselves first. You know that." Powell looked at the server racks as if they might answer for him. "I have 2 years until retirement." Maya nodded. "Then you understand exactly how much they can take from you." His eyes flashed with fear. "And you understand," she continued, "that written preservation can protect you if you act before the deletion happens." Powell whispered. "They told me it was a cleanup. Duplicate files, old complaint attachments, dead links. Did you believe that?" He did not answer. Maya lowered her voice. "I'm not asking you to steal anything. I'm asking you to preserve system logs before someone else destroys them." Powell rubbed both hands over his face. For a moment, he looked older than he was. Then he moved to a terminal and typed in a password with shaking fingers. "I can export access logs," he said. "File modification history, deletion queues, user IDs tied to complaint folders. But once I do this, they'll know someone pulled it." "How soon?" "Maybe by morning. Then, morning will have to be too late for them." Powell inserted an encrypted drive from a locked drawer. "If anybody asks, I never saw you." Maya looked at him. "If this goes where it should, Staff Sergeant, the record will show you preserved evidence under pressure." His hands paused over the keyboard. "You can promise that?" "I can promise I'll put it in writing." That was enough. For the next 40 minutes, the server room filled with the soft clicking of keys and the low hum of Risk. Powell exported logs showing after-hours access to Brooks's file, Whitaker's file, and at least 9 other complaint folders. Strickland's credentials appeared again and again. In several cases, Vance's command account had been copied on internal routing messages before formal investigations even opened. Then Powell found the deletion queue. Mercer leaned in. "Those are scheduled for tonight." Powell nodded, voice barely above a whisper. 2230. Automatic purge after manual approval. "Whose approval?" Powell clicked once. The screen populated. P. Strickland. Air. Vance. Maya stared at the names. The case had crossed another line. This was no longer only past retaliation. It was active destruction in progress. She took out Vance's signed counseling memo and placed it beside the exported log summary. The timeline was now brutally clear. Maya asked questions. Vance restricted and counseled her. Strickland prepared deletion. Powell was ordered to execute the purge. Mercer looked at Maya. "We send it." This time, she did not say no. "Draft the preservation alert," she said. "Address it to General Hensley's office and the Inspector General. Mark it urgent. Attach the log summary, Brooks recording transcript, excerpt, Whitaker memo, and Vance's counseling statement." Powell stared at them. "You're doing it now?" Maya looked at the deletion queue on the screen, then at the clock on the wall. 9:7 p. "Yes," she said. "Before their kingdom learns the walls have ears." 15 minutes later, from Administrative Office 3, Mercer transmitted the encrypted packet through a secure channel outside the Fort Redstone network. Maya stood beside him as the progress bar moved across the screen, slow enough to feel cruel. 20%, 40, 70. For a moment, the connection stalled. Mercer whispered, "Come on." Then the bar completed. Transmission successful. Maya exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Outside the office window, Fort Redstone lay under darkness, its old brick buildings washed in yellow security lights. Somewhere across the base, Strickland was preparing to delete the past. Somewhere in his command suite, Vance still believed the paper he signed had put Maya in her place. On Mercer's screen, a reply arrived less than 3 minutes later. Preservation order received. Do not alert local command. Further instruction pending. Maya read it twice. Then she looked at Mercer. "Now," she said quietly. We let them try. At 10:31 p.m., Records Annex B received the order to erase itself. The building sat on the far edge of Fort Redstone, past the motor pool and behind a row of pine trees that threw long black shadows across the service road. During the day, it looked forgotten. At night, under the weak yellow glow of security lamps, it looked almost abandoned. One-story brick, narrow windows, a side door with peeling paint, and a keypad that beeped too loudly in the dark. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Strickland arrived first. He parked his government sedan beside the loading dock and sat inside for a moment with the engine running. His face was pale in the dashboard light, his hands resting on the steering wheel. Strickland was not a man who enjoyed dirt. He liked distance, signatures, routed memos, soft language. He preferred other people to do the ugly work, while he made sure the ugly work looked administrative. But tonight, Colonel Vance wanted the files gone before morning. A white utility van pulled in 5 minutes later. 2 command clerks stepped out, both young, both nervous. Staff Sergeant Eli Powell arrived last, carrying his laptop bag and wearing the expression of a man walking toward a cliff because someone had called it a sidewalk. Strickland checked his watch. You're late, Powell swallowed. Had to finish a server backup, sir. Don't get clever tonight. No, sir. Strickland entered the keypad code and opened the side door. The smell inside the annex was old paper, dust, and dry cardboard. Rows of file shelves ran under fluorescent lights that flickered before fully waking. Boxes were stacked against the walls, labeled by year, department, and complaint category. Equal opportunity, civilian staffing, harassment intake, discipline review, command climate. Words that sounded safe until the wrong hands used them. Strickland handed one clerk a printed list. Everything marked for purge goes into the gray bins. Anything from the Brooks matter, Whitaker matter, or related complaint routing comes to me first. Do not read. Do not discuss. Do not ask questions. One of the clerks, a young woman with tired eyes, looked at the list. Sir, some of these are less than 3 years old. Strickland turned slowly. And I thought complaint files had to be retained longer. They are duplicates. She looked down. Yes, sir. Powell stood near the terminal station, hands hovering over his laptop bag. Strickland noticed. You'll log into the deletion queue and approve the digital purge. I want confirmation before we leave. Powell nodded. No one saw the secure preservation flag already attached to the server. No one knew the export had gone out more than an hour earlier. No one knew that every access attempt from this point forward would be mirrored to an outside channel authorized by General Hensley's office. No one, except Powell, and that knowledge sat on his chest like a stone. Across the base, in administrative office, 3, Maya, William, and Captain Mercer sat in the blue glow of Mercer's secure laptop. The office lights were off. Only the desk lamp remained on, angled low to keep the window from showing too much. On the screen, live access alerts appeared one after another. Records Annex B entry, 2231. User P. Strickland authenticated, 2234. User E. Powell authenticated, 2236. Complaint folder Brooks, L. Accessed, 2238. Mercer leaned forward. They're in. Maya stood behind him, arms folded, eyes fixed on the screen. She had removed the temporary badge and placed it on the desk beside Vance's signed counseling memo. The badge looked harmless there, a small rectangle of plastic that had fooled a colonel into showing his hand. Do not interrupt them, she said. Mercer glanced up. You realize how strange it is to watch a crime happen and wait? We're not waiting. We're recording. Another alert appeared. Whitaker. D file opened. 2241. Civilian staffing complaint archive accessed. 2242. Deletion queue modified. 2244. Mercer's jaw tightened. They're selecting more than Brooks and Whitaker. Of course they are. You sound unsurprised. Men don't burn one page when the whole book can testify. In Records Annex B, Strickland pulled a file from one of the gray bins and flipped through it with quick, irritated motions. Why is this still here? The clerk beside him stiffened. Which one, sir? Whitaker. He slapped the folder against the shelf. This should have been removed from active cross-reference months ago. The young clerk said nothing. Strickland looked toward Powell. Can you remove historical links? Powell's mouth went dry. I can remove local indexing references. Do it. Sir, if the file has already been backed up through regional. Strickland cut him off. This is not a discussion. Powell sat at the terminal and began typing. His fingers trembled just enough that he had to retype his password. On the screen, the system showed the purge queue. What Strickland could not see was the silent preservation process running behind it, copying each attempted deletion, each user ID, each timestamp. Powell clicked one folder, Brooks, then Whitaker, then 8 more names he had seen only in passing over the years. People reduced to file numbers, complaints closed, careers redirected, lives bent. He thought of his retirement, 2 years away. He thought of his wife's pill organizer on the kitchen counter, the one she refilled every Sunday after church. He thought of the mortgage payment due on the 1st. Then he thought of Maya's voice in the server room. They will call it an order today and make it your crime tomorrow. His hand steadied. He selected the files exactly as Strickland ordered. Then he let the system record every keystroke. Back in Administrative Office 3, Mercer watched the list expand. 10 complaint folders. He whispered. No, 11. 12. Maya leaned closer. Capture the screen. I am. A new alert appeared in red. Manual purge approval requested. User P. Strickland. Secondary approval required. R. Vance. Mercer looked at Maya. He needs Vance. Maya's eyes moved to the clock. 10:05. 5. 2. At that same minute, Colonel Richard Vance sat alone in his command suite. Jacket off, tie loosened, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling beside his keyboard. He had spent 30 years learning which rules could be bent, which people could be frightened, and which records could be shaped after the fact. He did not see himself as corrupt. Corrupt men took envelopes of cash in parking lots. Corrupt men sold secrets. Vance believed he maintained order. If a few weak soldiers had to be crushed so the rest remembered discipline, so be it. If a few complaints had to disappear to protect the mission, that was command. The purge request appeared on his screen. He read Strickland's note. Cleanup of redundant complaint archives per command review preparation. Vance smiled. About time, he muttered. He clicked approve. In Administrative Office 3, the screen flashed. Secondary approval. R. Vance. 2254. Mercer sat back slowly. We have him. Maya did not move. Now, send the live confirmation. Mercer attached the real-time purge record to the existing preservation packet and transmitted it through the secure channel. This time, the progress bar moved quickly. Transmission successful. Less than 1 minute later, the reply came. Acknowledged. Federal and regional command response authorized. Maintain position. Do not confront. Mercer read it aloud, then looked at Maya. Federal. Maya's face remained calm, but the word changed the air around them. Federal meant this was no longer just Fort Redstone correcting itself. Federal meant obstruction, civil rights violations, and destruction of official records had crossed into a different class of consequences. At Records Annex B, Strickland heard engines outside. Not one engine. Several. He looked up from the file in his hand. The young clerk near the shelf froze. Powell closed his laptop slowly, as though any sudden motion might break the moment. Headlights washed across the narrow windows. Strickland stepped toward the door. Who authorized vehicles back here? No one answered. A hard knock struck the side entrance. Then a voice called from outside. Clear and official. Open the door. Inspector General's office. Strickland's face drained of color. The second knock was heavier. Open the door now. Powell stood. Strickland turned on him. Did you call someone? Powell's voice was quiet. No, sir. That was true. He had not called anyone. He had preserved the truth, and the truth had called for him. Strickland opened the door with a hand that had lost its smoothness. 3 investigators entered first. followed by a military attorney from Regional Command and 2 federal agents in plain dark jackets. Their badges were not displayed for drama. They did not need drama. Authority entered the room with clipboards, sealed orders, and the kind of calm that made panic look childish. The lead investigator, a woman in her 50s with silver hair tucked neatly beneath her cap, looked directly at Strickland. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Strickland. Step away from the records. Strickland tried to recover. There has been a misunderstanding. We are conducting an authorized administrative cleanup. The investigator held up a document. A preservation order was issued before this activity began. These records are now under protective hold. Strickland blinked. I was not notified. No, she said. You were not. One federal agent moved to the terminal. Another began photographing the gray bins. The young clerks stood pale and silent near the shelves. Powell backed away from the computer, hands visible, face damp with sweat. The investigator turned to him. Staff Sergeant Powell? Yes, ma'am. You will remain available. Your preservation actions have been received. Powell's knees nearly weakened with relief. Across the base, Vance's phone rang. He picked it up sharply. Vance. For the first time that night, no one on the other end seemed interested in his rank. He listened for 10 seconds. Then he stood so fast his chair rolled backward and struck the wall. What do you mean the Inspector General is in my records annex? In Administrative Office 3, Maya heard none of that call. She only saw another message arrive on Mercer's screen. Records secured. Command notification pending. Prepare full witness packet by 0600. Mercer rubbed his hands over his face and let out a shaky breath. They stopped it. Maya looked through the dark window toward the far side of the base, where blue-white headlights still glowed behind the trees. No, she said softly. Vance stopped pretending. She picked up Clara's notebook photographs, Brooks's recording transcript, Whitaker's memo, Avery's routing sheets, Powell's logs, and Vance's signed counseling statement. One by one, she laid them in order across the desk. For 2 days, Vance had believed he was disciplining a woman who did not know her place. By morning, he would learn that Maya William had known exactly where she was standing. At the beginning of the paper trail, by 5:42 the next morning, Fort Redstone was awake in the way a base wakes, before bad news becomes official. Lights came on earlier than usual in the administration wing. Government sedans rolled through side gates instead of the main entrance. A pair of unfamiliar vehicles sat outside Records Annex B, their dark windows reflecting the pale gray dawn. Soldiers moving toward morning formation noticed the extra cars, the closed doors, the men and women with clipboards. But they knew enough not to stare too long. Rumors moved faster than Reveille. Something happened in records. Inspector General came in last night. Strickland got caught. No. It was about Brooks. No. It was bigger. Maya Williams sat in Administrative Office 3 with Captain Mercer, both of them surrounded by files, notes, transcripts, and printed system logs. Neither had gone home. Mercer's coffee had gone cold hours ago. Maya's eyes were tired, but her hands remained steady as she placed the final documents into the witness packet requested by Regional Command. At the top sat the clean timeline. Day 1. Public humiliation. Witness intimidation. Brooks file irregularities. Day 2. Clara's notebook. Earl Patterson's supply transfer. Dana Whitaker's hidden records. Brooks's recording. Vance's signed counseling memo. Night 2. Scheduled purge. Strickland access. Vance secondary approval. Inspector General intervention. Mercer read the list silently, then looked at Maya. When you put it like that, it feels inevitable. It wasn't inevitable, Maya said. It was preserved. He nodded, understanding the difference. A soft knock came at the door. Maya and Mercer both looked up. Sergeant Major Avery stood in the doorway, hat tucked beneath one arm, his face drawn and pale in the early light. They're moving fast, he said. Mercer stood. Who? Vance. Avery stepped inside and lowered his voice. He called an emergency command meeting for 000. He's telling people last night was a misunderstanding caused by unauthorized access and outside interference. Maya closed the packet folder. Of course he is. He's also ordered Sergeant Brooks detained for questioning. The room went still. Mercer's expression changed first. On what grounds? Unauthorized possession of official documents. Maya looked down at Brooks's name on the timeline. For 2 days, Brooks had been a witness. Now Vance was trying to make her a criminal before the truth could protect her. Where is she? Maya asked. Main gate holding office. They stopped her when she came in for duty. Mercer grabbed his folder. We need to call Hensley's office. Already did, Avery said. Regional command is en route, but they're not here yet. Maya stood slowly. Then, we go to Brooks. Avery stepped in front of the door. Major, Vance wants that. He wants you reacting. He wants to say you interfered with a lawful security matter. Maya picked up Vance's counseling memo and slid it into her folder. Then we give him another witness to his own retaliation. Mercer looked at her, worried, but ready. We need to be careful. We will be precise. The main gate holding office was a small concrete room beside the visitor control center. Its walls were painted a tired beige, and a television mounted in the corner played a morning news show with the volume muted. Sergeant Layla Brooks sat in a metal chair near the far wall, back straight, hands folded in her lap. 2 military police officers stood near the door. Lieutenant Colonel Strickland was there too, speaking to one of the MPs in a low voice. When he saw Maya, his expression tightened. Miss William, Strickland said, this matter does not concern you. Maya walked in with Mercer and Avery behind her. Sergeant Brooks is a witness in an active regional review. She is a soldier suspected of unauthorized possession of records. Mercer opened his folder. Has she been advised of the specific regulation she allegedly violated? Strickland looked annoyed. Captain, this is a command security matter. No, Maya said. It is retaliation against a witness after evidence was preserved from a scheduled records purge. The 2 MPs exchanged a quick glance. Strickland's face hardened. You should choose your words very carefully. I am. Brooks looked at Maya for the first time. There was no panic in her face, but there was something worse. The exhausted look of a woman watching the same machine come for her again. I didn't bring anything in, Brooks said quietly. They stopped me before I even got through the gate. Maya kept her eyes on Strickland. Was her vehicle searched? Yes, Strickland said. Was anything found? That is under review. That means no. One of the MPs shifted. Strickland snapped. Sergeant Brooks had access to documents she was not authorized to possess. Maya opened her folder and removed a copy of the preservation acknowledgement from General Hensley's office. She did not hand it to Strickland. She held it where the MPs could see the letterhead. Those documents are now part of a protected evidence hold. Sergeant Brooks is a material witness. Any further detention without written legal basis will be documented as witness intimidation. Strickland's mouth tightened. You have no authority to give orders here. Correct, Maya said. I'm not giving an order. I'm creating a record. The older MP near the door, a staff sergeant with deep lines around his eyes, looked at Mercer. Captain, are we supposed to have paperwork for this hold? Mercer answered immediately. Yes. The younger MP looked at Strickland. Sir? Strickland's face flushed. Colonel Vance authorized it verbally. Maya's voice remained calm. Then Colonel Vance can put it in writing. No one moved. That was the power of paper in a room built on verbal fear. It forced men to decide whether they were willing to leave fingerprints. Strickland looked toward the window, then back at Brooks. Release her to duty status pending further instruction. The older MP opened the door. Brooks stood, but before she stepped out, Strickland leaned closer. This is not over, Sergeant. Maya answered before Brooks could. No, it isn't. They left the holding office together. Outside, the morning sun had fully risen. Soldiers were lining up near the parade ground, and the sound of formation commands carried across the base. Brooks stopped near the walkway and took one slow breath, as if air itself had become something she did not trust. Thank you, she said. Maya shook her head. Don't thank me yet. Stay close to people who can witness where you are. Do not go anywhere alone if you can avoid it. Brooks gave a humorless smile. That's how you know you're in a good command climate. Avery looked toward the administration building. Vance's meeting starts in 20 minutes. Mercer turned to Maya. He'll use Brooks. He'll use last night. He'll say records were being mishandled and you created chaos. Let him. Brooks stared at her. You keep letting him swing. Maya looked toward the command wing, where Colonel Vance's windows reflected the brightening sky. Because every time he swings, he hits the wall he built. At 7:58, Conference Room 1 was packed. Vance had chosen the larger room deliberately. He wanted an audience. Senior officers, staff heads, enlisted leaders, legal personnel, and select administrative staff. If he could control the story in front of them, he might still survive the morning. He stood at the head of the long table, restored to his performance of command, though the strain around his eyes betrayed him. Strickland sat to his right, silent and rigid. Maya entered with Mercer and Avery. Brooks remained outside under the protection of 2 regional investigators who had just arrived at the gate. Maya noticed Vance, noticing that, and watched the first true flicker of uncertainty cross his face. He recovered quickly. This base, Vance began, has been subjected to an aggressive and deeply improper intrusion under the disguise of administrative review. No one spoke. He continued, voice rising. Last night, outside personnel interfered with routine records management based on incomplete information gathered by individuals who do not understand our mission, our culture, or our chain of command. Maya sat 3 seats from the end. Her folder rested closed before her. Vance's eyes found her. Some people arrive here believing suspicion is the same as justice. They speak to disgruntled employees, mishandle documents, encourage unstable soldiers, and call the resulting disorder accountability. The words were aimed at Maya, Clara, Brooks, Whitaker, and everyone who had ever tried to tell the truth inside Fort Redstone. Maya, let him speak. Vance placed both hands on the table. I will not allow this command to be weakened by political theater. The door opened. General Martha Hensley walked in. The entire room rose so quickly that chairs scraped across the floor. She was in her late 50s, silver-haired, composed, and carrying a thin black folder under one arm. 2 Inspector General investigators entered behind her, followed by a regional military attorney. At ease, General Hensley said. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Vance's face had gone still. General, I wasn't informed you were arriving personally. No, she said. You were not. She walked to the head of the table. Vance did not move until she looked at the chair behind him. Colonel, she said, step aside. For the first time since Maya had arrived at Fort Redstone, Richard Vance obeyed an order he could not twist. He moved 1 step back. General Hensley placed her folder on the table and looked around the room. This meeting is no longer under Colonel Vance's control. A silence fell over Conference Room 1, but this one was different. It was not fear. It was the sound of an old door beginning to open. General Hensley did not sit. She stood at the head of Conference Room 1 with both hands resting lightly on the black folder before her. The room remained frozen around her. Senior officers stood near their chairs. Enlisted leaders kept their eyes forward. Civilian staff hovered along the wall as if unsure whether they were allowed to breathe. Colonel Richard Vance stood 1 step back from the seat he had occupied only moments earlier, and that single step seemed to cost him more than any battlefield march. At ease, General Hensley said again. Chairs moved slowly. People sat, but no one relaxed. Maya William remained seated near the end of the table. Her folder closed, her posture calm. She felt Captain Mercer shift beside her, felt the quiet intensity of Sergeant Major Avery across the room, felt Vance's anger moving like heat from the head of the table, but she kept her eyes on General Hensley. The general opened the folder. Last night, Hensley said, my office received a preservation packet concerning alleged retaliation, discrimination, obstruction of review, falsification of official records, and attempted destruction of complaint-related files at Fort Redstone. No one moved. The packet included system logs, disciplinary routing sheets, recorded statements, complaint timelines, and a signed administrative counseling memorandum issued yesterday by Colonel Vance. Vance's jaw tightened. Hensley looked directly at him. Colonel, you will not respond unless I ask you a question. Vance's face darkened. General, with respect, That was not a question. The room changed again. A few officers lowered their eyes. Not because they were ashamed, though some were, because they had just seen Vance struck by the one thing he could not intimidate: superior, lawful authority. Hensley turned toward the regional military attorney standing near the wall. "Counsel, confirm the status of the preservation order." The attorney, a lean woman with a precise voice, opened her tablet. "A preservation order was transmitted at 2,149 hours last night, following receipt of credible evidence that complaint files were at risk of alteration or destruction. At 2,231 hours, Records Annex B was accessed by Lieutenant Colonel Strickland, 2 administrative clerks, and Staff Sergeant Powell. At 2,254 hours, a digital purge received secondary approval from Colonel Vance's command account." A low ripple moved through the room. It was not loud enough to be conversation, but it was enough. People understood timestamps. They understood names. They understood what it meant for a colonel's account to approve a purge after higher command had already been alerted. Vance spoke before he could stop himself. "That was routine cleanup of redundant material." Hensley looked at him. He stopped. Maya watched his hands. They were still at his sides, but his fingers had curled slightly, the only visible crack in the performance. General Hensley turned toward Maya. "Major William." For the first time in that room, her rank was spoken aloud. Several heads turned sharply. The young female lieutenant from the earlier meeting, Hannah Price, parted her lips slightly, then pressed them together. Sergeant Major Avery did not look surprised. Mercer did not move, though Maya sensed the tension release from his shoulders by an inch. Colonel Vance stared at Maya as if the chair beneath her had suddenly vanished and revealed a courtroom. Hensley continued, "Please identify yourself for the record." Maya stood. "My name is Major Maya William. I am a Judge Advocate General's Corps officer, assigned under regional authority to conduct a quiet entry review of internal complaint handling, disciplinary retaliation, harassment reporting, civilian staffing concerns, and related command practices at Fort Redstone." The words landed one by one. Not kitchen help, not administrative nuisance, not a woman who had wandered into the wrong courtyard. Major Maya William. Vance's face changed in stages. Confusion came first, then recognition, then outrage. Beneath all of it, something like fear began to move. Maya continued, voice even. "My quiet entry status was authorized to allow direct observation of ordinary command climate, without ceremonial preparation, witness coaching, or curated documentation." Hensley nodded. "And did Colonel Vance know your identity when he interacted with you?" "No, ma'am." "Did he know you were connected to the review?" "He was informed I was assigned to administrative support related to review procedures. He was not informed of my rank or JAG status." Vance snapped. "So this entire thing was deception." Hensley turned to him. "Colonel, you were instructed not to speak." Maya looked at Vance, then back to Hensley. "The purpose was not deception, ma'am. It was observation. Colonel Vance's behavior toward personnel he believed to be low-ranking or powerless was directly relevant to the review." Avery lowered his eyes, but Maya saw his hand tighten around his portfolio. Hensley looked around the room. "Let that be understood by everyone here. A command climate is not measured by how a colonel behaves in front of visiting generals. It is measured by how people are treated when he believes no one important is watching." The sentence struck harder than shouting would have. Maya remained standing. Hensley gestured toward the presentation screen. "Major William, proceed with the preliminary evidence summary." Mercer stood and connected the secure laptop. The screen flickered, then displayed a timeline. It began with Clara Mae Johnson's complaint about missing night shift food portions, and ended with the attempted purge in Records Annex B. Maya moved to the front of the room. She did not rush. Her calm was not theatrical. It was controlled, deliberate, and devastating. "On the morning of my arrival," she began, "I witnessed Colonel Vance publicly berate Mrs. Clara Mae Johnson, a civilian mess hall employee with more than 2 decades of service. When I questioned the treatment, Colonel Vance ordered me to kneel and clean spilled coffee in front of soldiers and staff. That incident was not included here as a personal grievance. It is included because it reflected a pattern confirmed by later evidence. The first slide changed. A photograph of Clara's handwritten notebook appeared, with dates and names enlarged. Maya continued. Mrs. Johnson maintained records of supply irregularities, missing food allocations, changed work schedules, and retaliation against civilian employees who questioned discrepancies. Her notes align with official supply transfer forms approved by Colonel Vance. The next slide showed Earl Patterson's requisition copy. This transfer redirected food allocated for night shift motor pool soldiers to a command hospitality function. Someone near the wall whispered, "Damn." Hensley did not look toward the whisper. She was watching Vance. Maya changed the slide. Next, Sergeant Layla Brooks. Brooks filed a harassment complaint against a senior NCO. 2 weeks later, she was demoted. The official file states performance and conduct issues. However, the file lacks required interview records, contains altered routing entries, and omits her request for outside review. Brooks's name appeared beside a timeline. Complaint filed. Command copied. Discipline initiated. Demotion approved. Then came the recording transcript. Maya did not play the audio yet. She let the words sit on the screen. Make her the example. Quietly. Just enough that the next one thinks twice. The silence became physical. Vance's eyes moved to Strickland. Strickland did not look back. Maya turned to the room. Those words are from a recorded conversation between Colonel Vance and Lieutenant Colonel Strickland regarding Sergeant Brooks. Hensley's voice cut in, controlled and cold. The full recording has been secured. Maya clicked to the next slide. Dana Whitaker's file appeared. Sergeant Brooks was not the first. Specialist Dana Whitaker filed a complaint involving the same senior NCO 8 months earlier. Her complaint was closed. She was then subjected to a mental fitness review she did not request and transferred out of Fort Redstone. Hannah Price closed her eyes briefly at the end of the table. Maya saw it, but did not pause. Documents recovered from archived maintenance records show Lieutenant Colonel Strickland signed the review recommendation. Colonel Vance approved it. A handwritten note from Whitaker states that Colonel Vance was copied before her complaint was formally opened. Vance spoke again, voice sharp. "This is selective presentation." General Hensley turned to the regional attorney. Note Colonel Vance's interruption. The attorney typed without expression. Vance fell silent, but rage burned in his face. Maya advanced the final slide. Last night, complaint files connected to Brooks, Whitaker, and at least 10 other personnel were selected for purge. The deletion required secondary approval. Colonel Vance's command account approved it at 2,254 hours. The screen displayed the log. P. Strickland. Manual purge request. R. Vance. Secondary approval. The room had nowhere left to look except the truth. Maya stepped back from the screen. This is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern. The pattern is retaliation against complainants, intimidation of witnesses, alteration of records, and attempted destruction of evidence after an authorized review began. General Hensley closed her folder. "Major William," she said. "Remain available." "Yes, ma'am." Hensley turned to Vance. "Colonel Richard Vance, you are relieved of control over this meeting and all records related to this review pending further action. You will surrender. Command access credentials immediately to the regional attorney." Vance stood very still. For 3 days, he had told others to remember their place. Now, for the first time, someone had named his. For a while after Colonel Richard Vance's suspension was signed, Fort Redstone did not know how to sound. The base still ran because bases always ran. Trucks still rolled through the motor pool. Morning formation still began on time. Coffee still brewed in the mess hall before sunrise. Soldiers still complained about the heat, the food, the paperwork, the long hours, and the endless inspections that seemed to multiply whenever a new officer arrived with a clipboard. But beneath the ordinary noise, something had changed. The old silence was gone. It did not vanish all at once. Fear rarely leaves like a door thrown open. It leaves like winter leaving an old house, first from the windows, then from the floors, then from the corners where the cold had been living so long people forgot warmth was possible. In the weeks that followed, Investigators moved through Fort Redstone with quiet precision. Colonel Vance's office was searched. Lieutenant Colonel Strickland gave 3 interviews and contradicted himself in all of them. The senior NCO named in the harassment complaints was removed from supervisory duty pending formal action. The digital logs Staff Sergeant Powell had preserved became part of a broader investigation into record tampering. The old complaint files were reopened one by one, and each reopened file seemed to bring another name out of the dark. Some people came forward quickly, others needed time. A mechanic waited until his lunch break, then walked into the temporary review office with a folded statement tucked inside his work glove. A civilian clerk brought screenshots she had kept on her personal phone for 2 years. A former supply worker mailed copies of staffing schedules from Tennessee with a note that simply read, "I thought no one would ever ask." Maya William read every line. She did not rush the wounded. She did not call fear cowardice. She understood that when a system punishes truth long enough, silence becomes less of a choice and more of a survival skill. Sergeant Layla Brooks's record was reviewed first. Her demotion was suspended, then formally reversed pending full restoration. The counseling statements written after her harassment complaint were flagged as retaliatory. Her original statement was restored to the file. When she was told that her rank would be returned, she did not cheer. She sat in the interview room with her hands folded and stared at the wall for several seconds. Maya waited. Finally, Brooks said, "My daughter asked me if the Army changed its mind about me." "What did you tell her?" Maya asked. "I told her the Army finally read the whole page." Maya nodded. "That sounds right." Brooks looked down at the sergeant's stripes lying on the table before her. The same stripes she had once packed away because seeing them hurt too much. "It's strange," she said. "I thought getting them back would feel like winning. And it feels more like being believed. That matters more." Brooks ran a finger over the stripes. "Yes, ma'am. It does." Mrs. Clara Mae Johnson became something of a legend before anyone officially called her a witness. People who had ignored her for years suddenly found reasons to thank her for coffee, for cornbread, for remembering who took sugar and who drank it black. She accepted the kindness carefully, as older women often do when they have learned that respect can be temporary. But the day an investigator returned her black notebook after copying every page, Clara held it against her chest and said, "I guess recipes weren't the only thing worth saving." "No, ma'am," Maya told her. They were not. Earl Patterson turned over 4 more supply transfer forms. Luis Ortega gave a sworn statement about Dana Whitaker. Lieutenant Hannah Price admitted she had left the first anonymous folder in Conference Room 2. Staff Sergeant Powell was protected under cooperation status, and his preservation of the logs became the reason several officers could no longer pretend the purge was accidental. By the end of the first month, Fort Redstone had a new acting commander, an interim reporting office, and a direct hotline to regional command for retaliation concerns. By the end of the second, every discipline action connected to a complaint from the previous 3 years was under review. Civilian staffing cuts were frozen. Harassment intake procedures were moved outside the direct control of the command office. The mess hall supply system was audited, and for the first time in years, the motor pool night shift received the meals it had been assigned on paper. The base was not perfect. No place built by human beings ever is. But it was different. 3 months later, Maya returned to Fort Redstone in full uniform. This time, there was no temporary badge clipped to her shirt, no borrowed roll, no low-level cover. Her JAG insignia was polished, her name tape clean, her rank visible. The guard at the main gate took her ID, checked the screen, and stood a little straighter. "Welcome back, Major William." The words were ordinary. That was why they mattered. Maya drove through the gate slowly. The old brick buildings still stood in the Georgia sun. The parade ground was still trimmed. The flag still moved above Fort Redstone, bright against the afternoon sky. But the place felt less staged now, less like a photograph arranged for visitors. It felt more like a base where people had begun telling the truth about what it cost to keep the picture clean. She parked near the mess hall. For a moment, she sat in the car and looked toward the back courtyard where Colonel Vance had once pointed at her face and called her an eyesore. She remembered the spilled coffee, the rag in her hand, Clara's pale face, the soldiers looking down because they had been trained by fear to survive that way. Then she got out. Inside the mess hall, lunch was winding down. The smell of chicken, green beans, coffee, and warm rolls filled the room. Soldiers sat in small groups, talking more freely than Maya remembered. Not loudly, not carelessly, but without the same tightness in their shoulders. Clara Mae Johnson stood behind the serving line, laughing at something a young cook had said. When she saw Maya, her face opened into a smile. "Well, look at you," Clara said. "Walking in the front door with your name shining where everybody can see it." Maya smiled. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Johnson. Don't you, Mrs. Johnson, me like you didn't scare 10 years off my life that week. I seem to remember you warning me." "I did. You didn't listen." "I listened. I just continued." Clara shook her head, but she was smiling. That sounds like something a lawyer would call obedience. Near the far wall, Sergeant Brooks stood with 2 younger soldiers, showing them a printed card with reporting channels and witness protection contacts. Her stripes were back on her sleeve. She looked tired, still, but no longer erased. When she saw Maya, she excused herself and walked over. "Major," Brooks said. "Sergeant." The simple exchange carried more weight than ceremony. Brooks glanced toward Clara. "Mrs. Johnson says, you're the reason this place has decent coffee now." Clara snorted. "Don't put that on her. That was me threatening to testify again, if they kept buying the cheap kind." Maya laughed softly. For a little while, they stood together without speaking. 3 women in a mess hall where, months earlier, humiliation had been mistaken for discipline. Clara with her notebook, Brooks with her restored stripes, Maya with the quiet knowledge that justice had not come because anyone powerful suddenly became generous. It came because ordinary people preserved what power tried to erase. "What happened to Vance?" Clara asked, though her tone suggested she did not care as much as she once might have. Maya answered carefully. "The investigation is still ongoing. His suspension remains in place. Additional administrative and legal actions are under review." Quote, Clara nodded. "That means he's got lawyers sweating through their shirts." Brooks almost smiled. "Most likely." Maya looked around the mess hall. "And Strickland? Transferred out pending proceedings," Brooks said. "Nobody says his name unless they have to." Clara folded her arms. Funny how quiet a kingdom gets when the king has to answer questions. Maya looked toward the back courtyard. Through the window, sunlight lay across the tile where coffee had once spilled. People passed through that space now without lowering their eyes. A young private held the door open for an older kitchen worker carrying a box of napkins. 2 soldiers stopped to help when a tray slipped from a cart. No one shouted. No one needed to make an example out of anyone. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. Not victory. Something humbler. Relief, maybe. Or the first honest breath after leaving a room full of smoke. Captain Mercer entered the mess hall with a folder tucked beneath one arm. He looked less tired than he had during those 3 days, though the experience had left its mark on him. Courage often did. It carved a person, but it also straightened them. "Major William," he said. "General Hensley's office confirmed the new review protocols are fully active." "Good. And the independent reporting office opens Monday." Clara pointed a serving spoon at him. "You make sure they put it somewhere people can find, without walking past 3 colonels and a locked door." Mercer nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am. That recommendation has already been made." "Good. Then maybe somebody learned something." Maya looked at Mercer. People did. He met her eyes and understood she meant him too. Later, before leaving, Maya walked alone to the old back courtyard. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, coffee, and warm brick. The same administrative building stood behind her. The same path led toward Office 3. The place had not physically changed much, but places remember. Maya stood where she had knelt 3 months before. She did not feel shame there. That surprised her. Vance had wanted that image to live as humiliation. A black woman on one knee, wiping coffee while soldiers watched. But memory does not always obey the person who creates it. Sometimes the meaning changes when the truth arrives. He had thought he was showing the base who had power. Instead, he had shown Maya where the case began. Brooks found her there a few minutes later. She did not ask what Maya was thinking. She only stood beside her. After a while, Brooks said, My daughter wants to be a lawyer now. Maya turned. Does she? Says soldiers need people who can read the rules better than bullies. That is a very good reason. Brooks looked toward the flag. She asked me if justice is always fair. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, justice is not always fair at first. Sometimes it arrives late. Sometimes it arrives tired. Sometimes it has to be carried by people who should never have had to carry it. But when it finally stands up, it has to stand for everybody, or it isn't justice at all. Brooks nodded slowly. I'll tell her that. The afternoon light softened over Fort Redstone. In the distance, a formation broke apart. Soldiers scattering toward duty stations, vehicles, families, and ordinary errands. Life continued. That was the point. Not the dramatic fall of one man, but the quieter rise of people who no longer had to live beneath his shadow. Maya walked back toward her car. At the gate, the same guard from earlier raised his hand in a respectful farewell. Have a good day, Major. You too, Maya said. The barrier lifted. She drove out of Fort Redstone without being stopped, questioned, mocked, or made small. Behind her, the base remained imperfect, unfinished, still carrying scars. But it was no longer Vance's kingdom. It belonged again to the people who served, worked, cooked, repaired, reported, endured, and finally spoke. Colonel Vance had believed rank made him untouchable. He had believed fear was discipline, and silence was loyalty. He had believed a young black woman with no visible rank could be humiliated into obedience before the whole base. But he had mistaken stillness for weakness. He had mistaken patience for fear. And worst of all, he had mistaken Maya William for someone who had come to learn her place. She had come to find the truth. 3 days later, his suspension was signed. And months after that, Fort Redstone finally began to remember what honor was supposed to mean. The lesson of Maya Williams' story is that true justice does not always arrive loudly, but it must arrive with courage, truth, and accountability. Colonel Vance believed power gave him the right to humiliate, silence, and punish those beneath him. But he forgot that authority without integrity eventually destroys itself. Maya showed that calmness is not weakness, patience is not fear, and silence can become powerful when it is used to gather the truth. Her story reminds us that every person, no matter their rank, race, age, or position, deserves dignity. And when ordinary people are brave enough to preserve the truth, even the strongest walls of injustice can begin to fall. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, I would truly love to hear your thoughts on the storytelling, the emotional pacing, or whatever stayed with you after listening. Every comment you share helps make the next stories more honest, moving, and meaningful. And if you have a powerful or meaningful story of your own, please do not hesitate to send it to the channel. It may become the next story to touch and inspire thousands of others. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.